do you agree or disagree that a God has a supernatural element to it by definition?
I mean, in the definition of what's the definition of supernatural, though? Sorry, I don't want to have you looking up a ton of definitions, but
No, I always this always kind of helps. I mean, the definition of supernatural is something that would exist that does not operate by the laws of physics of the universe.
I mean, it only
So
operates by the laws of the physics of the universe that we don't understand. Gravity was supernatural until we understood it.
yes, well, yeah, you're right. But I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean, for example, if we understood everything about the natural universe, it does not exclude the possibility that there is another realm that is operated by other laws of physics, right? Or by laws of physics outside of our universe. So we would call
Yeah,
that within our unit, referring to our universe, we would call that supernatural, even if it was a parallel universe. It would be. I mean, that's what they meant when was it Aristotle made a series of books about natural
hmm
philosophy, and then there was the metaphysics, which is like beyond physics, which
hmm
just referred to everything that they couldn't explain with physics. And obviously, we've come further along that road now, but that's what the word supernatural means. And a God definition means that there is a supernatural element. Not to say that it's something within our universe that we don't understand. I want to have a little conversation with you, everybody. So uh, with him. So just give me a couple of minutes to get started, and then I'll let more people in. That doesn't mean that because we don't know something of our universe, that a realm outside doesn't exist. However, we
yeah,
have to keep the possibility open that it indeed does not. We can't assume that it,
yeah,
it must exist.
yeah. I mean, of course I'm open to the possibility that it doesn't exist, but I think if there is no religion, then there is also no free will, and if there's no free will, then we aren't even real, and we should just kind of all like off ourselves.
Why do, that's a very odd jump in
Do
logic
you,
when
as an
people are
atheist, do
so
atheists
so
believe we have free will?
some do, some don't. It's kind of mixed. The science on that is mixed for between the deterministic parts of the universe, which is to say that it appears to be deterministic, and the quantum physics piece of the world, which appears to not be deterministic.
Yeah.
And I know Robert Sapolsky, who is one of the best in the field on this subject. He's written a book called Determinism, or Determined is the book, and um, he thinks that we are determined because we are influenced by all the variables that impinge upon us
Yeah.
throughout life, but we're just not aware of all those variables. So it feels like we are having free will.
Yeah. I understand both perspectives of that.
So I don't know. I mean, I tend to think that we do have free will, but to a degree, because if there are things in quantum physics that begin processes like thoughts or whatever, we don't have control over that. So we have a bit of our brains are calculators of a certain complexity, if that kind of makes sense, and we appear to make decisions. So it's a bit of a semantic thing to say that we do or we don't. I don't know if the free will position is all that universal in atheists. What have you experienced speaking to them?
I mean, I've only really talked to one person that was actually educated in their belief on being an atheist because not to be insulting to atheism, but the vast majority of people I've met who are atheists are more from a perspective of laziness and a more of an idea that I'll never understand it, so I'm not even going to try to understand it. Obviously, you are not like
And
that.
that's okay too, honestly, because most of the population is just average folk, and there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. You and I are sitting here having a conversation because we're interested in this conversation. That is not to say that everybody has to be. So I don't mind that on either side. I can say the same thing on the Christian side, and I've seen that on the atheist side. There are many people I know on the atheist side who just I don't believe in God, therefore I don't want it to. I don't need that subject taking any time of my life. So you're right there. That's a sort of mental. Once the decision has been reached, then they're done and on to off to other things. So not everybody's into the philosophy and the logic and trying to figure out, why we have believers and why we have non-believers. So
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's really all like all I got. I can't really think of anything else, but
okay.
I don't know. I don't
Well,
know. In a
what's your position on free will?
I think we do have free will.
You
I
think
think
we
that's what
do?
separates us from everything else. I believe that every other organism doesn't have free will. I don't think that dogs have
Mm.
free will. I don't think cats have free will. Any other living organism, I think humans are the only organism that possesses free will because we were made in God's image.
I
And
think you're wrong there because the animals are there's a increased complexity as you go higher up the evolutionary tree. So for me, there's two things that are sort of like turns. One is one once you become self-aware, right? And
mhm.
we they test that typically by putting a mirror in front of animals and see which ones can recognize themselves and which one thinks it's another creature. And it's somewhere along the big cat to chimpanzee range. It's there's not a solid line of when it happens. Um, and the other is being aware of having a brain that's big enough, and this is in higher primates only, and maybe something like a dolphin that you're aware of abstract thoughts and concepts, and
Yeah,
particularly to have um, free will, you have to be aware of time concepts,
yeah.
right? And so choices comes along. That it's that level of complexity, and humans are not the only ones.
Yeah, but and Kimmy in the chat is defending the animal kingdom. She said animals and insects are highly evolved and complex, and I will completely agree with that. But
Yeah,
in comparison to how evolved humans are, they are pretty far behind and pretty
there.
minuscule. Even if you compare some of the most
Yeah,
intelligent animals, it's a pretty big gap in terms of evolution. Like, I mean, I guess
yeah.
humans just got pretty lucky.
Well, no, we're the top of the chain so far. I mean, like I say, I'm not sure of the two big animals that come to mind, or three would be whales, dolphins, and elephants. In terms of having
Hmm.
a brain that's large compared relative to the body size, the body mass, um, that might have similar complexity, but they don't seem to have, at least the elephants don't seem to have the language ability. The other two might, but none of the other three have the ability, the dexterity that we do. So it may be one thing, we may have dolphin philosophers, but we don't have dolphins able to modify their environment. And once you get into complex culture, then you have the ability that makes the big change, which is the ability to pass information from generation to generation, and that lets the species go further than every generation before, because every generation doesn't have to learn from scratch.
I mean, yeah, just the ability to connect and whatnot. I mean, I think there is evidence in animals of them teaching. Like, can't monkeys like teach other monkeys how to
Hmm.
open bananas
Yeah,
and use tools,
yeah,
or like beavers making dams? But I don't know. I don't think that
yeah.
that justifies them having free will.
Well, beavers making dams, probably not that one, because it's like birds making nests. That probably gets into their DNA, that kind of behavior. When you don't have to teach the next generation. But it's like anything else in psychology. Everything's on a spectrum, and everything happens very slowly over time, and in very small steps, many small steps. So I don't this is just my opinion, and from what I've read to some degree on the subject, that it's an on and off, yes, free will, no free will. It is varying degrees of
Hmm.
understanding what the concepts mean, and it comes slowly over time, over long
So
time. I
you
mean,
think there was a point in evolution where humans maybe didn't have free will?
well, I mean,
You think we evolved
let's
to
go back
have free will?
let's go back 7 million years. Yeah, oh sure, of course. As soon as the frontal lobe gets to a certain level of complexity, then you have it. Because we know that I want to say chimpanzees, but I'm not quite sure. I know chimpanzees have um, the ability to know other minds. That a mind exists. The other chimp has a mind that's different than its own, and I can't remember if it's the chimpanzee does or the chimpanzee doesn't. Well, not all of the apes have the ability to recognize themselves in a mirror. Um, so that's fairly high up. But understand that you go back 7 million years and you're talking about Australopithecus and that generation of hominids, and those animals are going to be probably about the same as chimps and such are today. So, and then there's what, 30 species between us and them. So
Hmm.
it did come along the way at some point, and to a greater and greater degree as you get closer and closer.
All right. Well, the last thing I'll say before I let someone else talk,
Yeah.
and this, I'm gonna say this, I really don't have any evidence to back this up. I don't frankly remember why I believe this, but my viewpoint on evolution is I believe that everything can be explained through science, including higher entity, heaven and hell. Even though we may not understand it yet, I believe that there is some explanation in our physical world. There is some explanation. And in the terms of evolution, I believe that just because it is possible, and I believe that it is scientifically accurate that we evolved from tiny organisms,
Hmm.
isn't exact. That doesn't necessarily mean it's exactly what happened, because I think in our physical world there is a scientific explanation for everything. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way it played out. The way I said it to somebody earlier was it's like a video game where you have 10 levels and all levels are sequential,
Yeah.
but we started on level 5 because in my religion that's the way that our uh our creation came to be. That doesn't mean levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 never like are unrealistic, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they happened. That's my viewpoint. I really don't have much evidence for it. I don't remember why I believe that.
What does level 5 mean?
Like us,
If you have a evolutionary tree,
like Adam and Eve,
then why would we have started on level 5 as opposed to just part of the same tree as everything else that exists?
because I believe that that's the way that creation came to be. I believe that although evolution is feasible, I don't think that it's what happened. Even though it scientifically is accurate that it could have happened and it can be explained that it could have happened, I don't think it's what happened. Like
So,
if you see a house across the street, it is very possible that that house was built brick by brick across the street.
well,
That
yeah,
doesn't
of
necessarily
course,
mean
yeah.
it's what happened. It could have been brought there and put there.
Yeah,
But the
well, we
scientific
know a house
explanation,
is not a natural process.
yeah, but that's just an example. I'm just saying, although it is scientifically, like it can be scientifically explained the process of evolution, personally, I just don't believe that that means it necessarily had to have happened.
Do you think it happened for, I don't want to say animals because we're animals too. Do you think it happened for other animals but not for
Yeah,
humans?
I understand what you mean. I mean, honestly, no, I don't think it did, even though we have lots of evidence that it did, because I believe that that is the scientific story that like can be written. Doesn't necessarily mean it is what happened, because when you take this perspective of a like of a simulation of this god pulling the strings and putting people, just because that makes sense scientifically doesn't mean we didn't all just start with a snap of the fingers. It doesn't I don't think the scientific evidence of evolution cancels out the religious aspect of creation.
Okay, well, so look at all this. So are you suggesting that all of this happened and that humans happened as Adam and Eve independent of all this?
Well, I mean, go to the earliest one.
Well, on this chart, the earliest
Yeah,
one is referring.
there looks like there's probably like millions of years of a gap between a small organism and that first skull.
Yes, yes. This is a very modern chart. This is a very
Yeah.
modern chart. This is I do have a photo of this one. It looks kind of like a similar to a modern primate. Not quite, but yeah, and then there's about 3 billion years before this chart.
Yeah.
So again, do you think that Adam and Eve just happened and that all of these, let me just go to the other end of it, except for Homo sapiens, just all became extinct at some point,
Um,
and then Adam and Eve happened?
as unrealistic as it seems to say for me to say yes, I don't think it's any more unrealistic than accepting that all of that did happen. I don't think the belief
Wow.
that we just spawned in is any more unrealistic than the coincidence that we have eyes or the neurons in our brains. The coincidence of that is just as unfathomable as the coincidence of the story of creation in Genesis.
How
They're
old,
equally unfathomable.
how old do you think the Adam and Eve story is? Do you have any concept of that? Any opinion?
I mean, a couple thousand, 10,000 years, somewhere around there. Not
10,000
sure.
years. Do you have any idea of why a deity would have gone through all this 3.5 billion years of evolution and then only in the last 10,000 years put Homo sapiens on the planet?
Well, in the grand scheme of the beginning of time and the end of time, I don't know. Time, I guess time is a little irrelevant to a higher being.
Phil, I'm not sure, can you explain that there is certain markers within our DNA that match, like retroviruses match the same with chimpanzees and other animals, and that could not have been there unless we have common descent. So there's no way we could have just popped into place unless somebody used some type of like printer or cloning machine to copy these things. We know that we are literally like there's things that literally mark us identically, and there's no way for that to be a accident. You know what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
Phil,
that's
right?
a
I'm
that's a
not a
that
hundred
that
percent.
is a good point. I mean, this is one way that these charts uh under in current day sequencing get to be in the order that they are because they can we can do DNA analysis on most of these. Some of these were still early findings when we only have a jaw or something, but a lot of these we have full skeletons, and we can do DNA analysis and see that where there the common markers are, and this one will have a certain marker and this one won't, and that leads us to realize that this one's our ancestor. You see how the charts kind of go left and right here, for example. So we may not have markers from some of these green ones over here, but the blue ones that we definitely would. And of course, the same thing goes back further back the chart you go to. We've got similar markers to bacteria, just on the basis of how we metabolize sugars, for
I
example.
mean, still from a religious perspective, it would make sense that we all have similar markers. And I'm not 100% confident on the story of creation, but I'm pretty sure even in the story of creation, before they understood any of this, it said that we are all connected to animals and whatnot. That animals were not made in our image, but I don't know. I need a refresh on the Book of Genesis,
Yeah,
but I mean, it would make sense that
animals were made as
But these,
companions right before
but these,
Eve, as I recall.
these markers were caused by viruses. So these viruses created these markers, and they were passed along. And
Yeah,
these allow scientists to really show a lot of it. And so again, this shows common descent and common ancestry. And
ancestry. Yeah,
again, yeah. And so again, evolution is pretty much is a fact, and again, a deity, a god could, you could say use this, but again, I guess the question is, you say that humans, that maybe we were popped down, we weren't, it wasn't created through evolution, but I guess the question that I have is, like Phil and I, how do you know this? Like, do you have evidence? And I guess that's what we want to know is, what evidence do you have?
I mean, really, I don't have much evidence. I'm not super informed on this topic. I've never really even debated this before. But
Well, you
um,
do have some inconsistencies there. So
yeah,
because
well,
you understand this sequencing process,
yeah. I
and
mean,
yet
even
you
this
want to
this
throw Adam and Eve in there, which seems to
well,
be two
the
paths they
story of
shouldn't cross.
well, I mean, is that even true? Because evolution doesn't necessarily dismiss Adam and Eve, because who's to
Yeah,
say the story of Adam and Eve doesn't start because you said
yeah,
when our frontal lobe developed, well, there
Yeah,
was a second where our frontal lobe wasn't developed, and then there was a second later where our frontal lobe was developed. So possibly that could be interpreted
no,
as the start of Adam and Eve. There
it's
could be a second where we were organisms, then we were fish or whatever. I don't know the scientific evolution
yeah.
process, but up to some point, there's a point where click, everything changed. That could be interpreted as the
It,
start of Adam and
it's
Eve.
not that it's much more gradual. I mean, to see a difference from one species to the next, you probably have to go somewhere in the range of 10,000 generations.
yeah. And there was
So
never
I
just
mean,
yeah,
two. There was never just two. And Homo sapiens, the lowest amount of Homo sapiens was about 10 to 15,000 at one time. And that was pretty low
yeah,
in the genetics. So, again, two of any species is pretty much extinction level,
yeah.
anything. So, yeah. And I
yeah,
guess,
yeah, I agree. Like I said before, that's where my 1% agnostic comes in, because I don't believe that religion is necessarily accurate. I believe it's an interpretation of what we don't necessarily understand.
Well,
That's why I'm not saying
read
that
up
Adam
on
and
it.
Eve is set in stone.
Read up on it, or
Would you mind if I
watch a couple of
would you mind if I
evolution
chime in just a
videos.
little bit?
Yeah, please
I'm,
come on in.
I'm working on a discovery in New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, with prehistoric ancient giant burials,
Ooh,
and I found 21 giant skeletons. There's quite a bit that's in New Jersey, and they even took aerial pictures of New Jersey in 1930. They're online today to show you high definition quality pictures, cloud free, of the whole state of New Jersey, to show you all the ancient ruins, petroglyphs, geographs, and there's a lot. There's
what's
a
the
lot in
size?
New
What's
Jersey.
the size of a giant? What are you talking about here?
Well, the mounds are up to 1,200 feet high in northwest New Jersey, 30 miles west of New York City, in the township of Roxbury. Roxbury Township is, I believe, the holiest place in the United States of America. It's founded on December 24th, 1740, in District 25. And since this valley, it's called Succotasunny, it used to be called Black Rock. There's a lot, and it has to do with national treasures and the actual treasure map on the back of the dollar bill, the big pyramid with the seeing eyes in the roadways, and the three pyramids on the back of the dollar
Okay,
bill,
wait.
ancient
No,
well,
mounds.
you're
you
going,
said giants.
yeah.
Yes,
So
yes, giants. The Lenni
giant.
Lenape. Lenni
So
Lenape giants, skeletons.
not mounds of hills and stuff.
Well, there's massive.
How big are
There's
giants?
there's really big artifacts. I'm telling you, there's spearheads up to 4 feet long. I found.
That's not a skeleton. I'm talking about skeletons.
Well, no, the
You said they were
skeletons are they're between 8 and 9 feet. The skeletons, the 21 that were dug up in
Ah,
1960, and
okay.
they were reburied behind where George Washington had an arsenal and a hospital.
So, can you tell me why we don't see this in the Smithsonian? Why I haven't seen anything like this in the National Geographic? Why, um, in any class of history none of us have taken, I have not heard anything of this, except for some of this I've heard in the movie of National Treasure with Nicolas Cage about the dollar bill and stuff. Not being mean to you, but why haven't I heard anything at all? I'm just curious.
The discovery is being suppressed because in 2007 they tore down the mansion and all the other structures and robbed the tunnel system. And all the same.
I'm looking in a quick Google
Sounds a little
search
conspiracy
about
theory.
about giant skeletons. Says claims of giant skeletons have been debunked. For example, in 1883, an Indianapolis Journal article reported that a 9-foot skeleton was found, but an investigation concluded that
Well,
the
Abraham
bones
Lincoln said in his
were not from a
1848
giant.
speech at Niagara, in 1848, and it's in the Library of Congress, his writings, that the mounds of America are full of giant bones.
And we know, we know that just according to hormonal abnormalities, there's
Well, I have 10,000
the
pounds of giant
tallest guy ever recorded is 8'11". So that's, to be honest, that's too close to.
Well, if you saw what they did in Roxbury Township with the huge serpent heads and the carvings and the petroglyphs and the boulders that are stacked on top of a mountain where the phoenix bird is, you'll go up there and go, oh my gosh. There's even an Eastern Island guy.
Just quickly, like, okay, just say that for like argument's sake or something, there were these giant skeletons, and like how is this evidence for there being a god? Like, I don't.
Well, there's tombs on the side of a hillside. I found 7 of them in a row. It's like they're Atlantean Moor tombs.
But how is that evidence for God? How is that evidence for God?
Well, there's a lot on the 1930 aerial pictures, and we went down to Trenton and explored down there too. And there's the ancient buildings, and there's a lot of stuff that was left behind that's here in New Jersey. You can look at the 1930 aerial pictures. The entire Delaware River was carved into faces.
Delaware. Yeah, but just quickly, like, you understand that like an atheist or somebody that just holds to some theory of evolution might just grant to you that there are these skeletons or something, but that doesn't give you any kind of reason to believe that theism is more probable than like some naturalist hypothesis, right? Because they're both.
Well, the mounds that I found, there's biggest mounds down to the smaller mounds, and there's 3 ancient burial sites I found: New Jersey, Long Island, and Connecticut, where George Washington had his tour. Okay, you go to those sites, you'll find the ancient burials, you'll find the ancient mounds. Center landmass, Long Island, highest point. There was 7 mounds that make the Big Dipper. In 1991, George Bush bulldozed 3 of them and built a war memorial.
You didn't respond. None of that responded to what I just said.
I think you just wanted to tell us something cool.
Yeah, it's just like.
But I don't have their skeletons in Long Island, but I have their artifacts. I found their artifacts. I found their carvings. There's a serpent bird mound that I found that's a half a mile long, and a Catholic Church cemetery has already bulldozed through 2 sections of it.
I feel like you're just repeating, like on repeat or something. Like I'm asking you, why does this give you reason to accept the God hypothesis over like a naturalist hypothesis?
Yeah, how do we know that this is not just abnormal humans? Like, because like Phil said, the tallest human is 8 feet 11 inches. So there could have been a group of very tall humans, and that gentleman did not live that long, so they probably would have not lived long. There's a natural explanation. I mean, here's the thing, but the problem is like George Bush bulldozing. You in the day and age of like you don't think nobody would have said anything? Like, I feel like
well, in 1990,
this would have been everywhere, not just a national inquiry. This would have been everywhere.
There's a lot. You just have to go out and you seek and you shall find. Everything I have found. I have 10,000 pounds of artifacts. Okay,
dude, it doesn't matter how many pounds of artifacts you have. Okay, back on topic. I have a question. Do atheists believe in the existence?
Go ahead.
Do atheists believe in the existence of Jesus Christ?
I mean,
it's about 60-40. Most do, and most if they do believe, they believe it is just a person. Well,
right.
Yeah. Okay. All of them. Yeah.
No, I think this is such a hard thing to talk about because I think there is no evidence that there is a God, which I don't think dismisses that there is a God. I think it's similar to, like I said earlier, I think it's try to explain to a dog that you exist. It's impossible. The same way I think it's impossible for any higher entity to explain to us that it exists. I think we'll never understand.
I think where we differ here is that keeping
at that point it's just opinion.
No, because there's evidence for things just like the chart above. So,
and I also think
So
I also think there's evidence against the God hypothesis, to be clear.
yeah, I would agree on that too.
And
So
Danny,
you know, you
and
just have to keep in mind that there's a possibility that that it's not true. So as long as you're having a discussion and keeping that in intellectual honesty.
So if you want to find giant burial mounds, the back of the $1 bill in the
Jesus
big
Christ.
letter E, there's 3 pyramids.
cool.
They're ancient burial mounds of
Cool.
these
Awesome.
giants.
We'll look into that.
Artifacts are there.
Okay.
There's entrances and everything.
All right, we're gonna let that topic go
Awesome.
because that's
Yeah, can I
that's
get
a
some
little
of the
bit too
evidence
So
crazy.
of
Danny,
Sure, I have
the
15
thing
other
about
videos.
Jesus
You
existing,
can go see them.
the weird thing about this is like we don't have any writings actually during the time of his life. That's what's the weirdest thing. I'm not a mythicist, but it's just very odd that we don't have anything. So I kind of take the approach that maybe he's based off many different people. He could have been somebody that just went under the radar until he was killed by the Romans, and then that's what spread again his message, and people followed again. It's possible, but
Well, I
here's
think
the thing.
there's.
Here's the
I
thing.
think
Men carry on. Like again, people follow dead people. Like Joseph Smith. There's many followers based off Joseph Smith, and we know he was a real person and he died. He was killed. But again, there's to me, Jesus could be the same as Joseph Smith.
Well,
Yeah.
we know Joseph Smith was a lot more like L. Ron Hubbard than he was Jesus, for one thing.
I know, but what I'm saying is that basically there's a lot of people who follow somebody after they die. And again, these people thought that maybe he existed. But again, I have no way to tell you whether or not he did or he didn't. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, I think
Alright,
there's
well-
good historical. I think there's good historical evidence that like a man named Jesus that did claim to be like some god or something did like
This
get killed
dude
by
is
the
showing my
Romans.
house on his screen. That's like
But-
exactly where I live. That's so weird.
But
Anyway.
we don't even know if this guy existed that he did claim to be. We have a book that says he did exist, that he did. Some books of the gospel say he claimed to be God. Some of them at the beginning don't say he claimed to be God. That's the problem.
Well, we have like I think, and you could correct me on this. I think there's like a publication on it. I think there's a Roman death article or something. Like they wrote down the deaths of people they killed or something, and there's like strong evidence for that. I'm pretty sure like a lot of historians, like there's
Really?
an overwhelming majority of historians believe that Jesus did die for those reasons, but there's not like strong evidence that like Jesus had like these powers and things like that. Yeah.
I don't know about the records. I will look into that. I'm not again. This is the first I've heard of that there's supposedly records to show that he was a real person, because there's some really good mythicists people out there like David Fitzgerald, and there's another gentleman, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but there's some really good people, and you would think that these people who do a lot of research would know something like that.
What records are you referring to? I've not heard this either.
Yeah, apparently there's there's this guy he debated, and he's on YouTube. I can't remember his name though, but he's like a historian, like an ancient artifact historian, and I think he has like a PhD or something. And I saw him like in an interview talking about how there's like Roman death records of Jesus around that time, like a man named Jesus, and there's like a birth certificate. So I don't, yeah, something like that.
Birth certificate.
Yeah, it was something like that. There was like a birth record of a man named Jesus that lived around the same time, and they're all. Yeah.
That sounds awfully suspicious.
Yeah.
And honestly, something that could be faked really easily.
Richard Carrier. So Richard Carrier and David Fitzpatrick are probably the best two people when it comes to authors who write about mythicism. Again, I'm not a mythicist. When Phil said 60-40, I kind of go back and forth. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter. The question is,
I agree.
can you prove that this person was divine and that was actually a god?
Yeah.
Or how do we know that he was just not an alien from
We
the,
don't
the
know
planet
anything.
Yeah.
from
We'll
the
never
planet
be able to prove
Cobalt.
anything.
I mean, it
That from
seems.
the from the planet Cobalt that was basically started 8 billion years, and so their
I mean,
technology allows
I
them to
understand
regenerate.
that. I understand that, but hypothetically, if Jesus was not who he said and he was just another normal person, we're not going to be able to prove it. Hypothetically, if Jesus was exactly who he said, we're also not going to be able to prove it.
Right.
Yeah, but
So
you can give like kind of motivation to believe one way or the other, right? Like,
yeah, I mean that I think that's just where the term faith comes in. But
Well,
earlier you
not
guys mentioned
faith. Wait,
earlier
not
Well,
just to be clear, like not faith, like evidence, right? Like that's what I was talking about there, like something probability raising.
the
Like,
faith is choosing to believe for no reason. So
yeah,
you got to tell us what your
and I think
reason
there are
is,
no
and
reasons.
maybe your reason is that you want to believe or something vague
Yeah,
like
maybe.
that. Um, but it's not a by definition it is not a reason to believe.
like,
Okay, well, anyway, you guys earlier mentioned you said there was because I was like, there's no evidence that there isn't a God, and you guys said I was
yeah,
wrong. So if you guys could tell me some of the evidence, I
yeah.
genuinely was curious.
I can give you one piece of evidence. Like, okay, are you familiar with like Occam's razor? Like,
No.
okay, well, okay. Imagine I have a car, like, there's a car outside of my house, okay? And I have like some hypothesis that there's a car outside of my house. And then I keep adding things to that hypothesis, right? I say, well, maybe there's a red car outside of my house, right? The more kind of properties I list about the car outside of my house, the less likely the thing outside of my house is that thing. It's true, right? Like if I say there's a red car outside of my house and there's four clowns inside, like the probability of that is very low, or at least it's lower than there being a car outside of my house, like on its own, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that's basically what Occam's razor is, okay? So when you give a hypothesis, the simplest hypothesis, all things equal, is more probable, okay? Um, so you can just take the atheist, or the naturalist kind of hypothesis to the expansion of the universe, and then you can take the theist hypothesis. Now, the theist hypothesis has an explanation that includes all the things that the naturalist includes in the data, right? But then it also posits one more thing. It posits a non-natural entity, right? God, something that exists outside of space and time, right? But the naturalist
Well,
doesn't have to do that, right?
well, like I said earlier, I disagree that God doesn't have to exist outside of space and time just because we don't understand it. But anyway, continue.
It doesn't have to exist outside of space. Well, presumably, you would
It,
think that. Well, because look, I just take the universe to mean like a set of all things that exist, right? And presumably,
all
God,
things
if
that you understand. Just because it's all things that you understand doesn't mean it's all things that exist.
what you talk, what do you? No. I just take the universe to be all everything that exists, right? Now, in order to say that God created that, right? In order to say He created the universe, you would have to say that God is separate from the universe, right? God is separate from all things that exist, or all
I
things that
still
occupy.
disagree that you don't have to say that. You can say God and the universe are one and the same as he created himself and the universe. It doesn't make any sense, but it's not going to make any sense because we're not going to understand either outcome.
Well, no, that's just genuinely like a contradiction, like
Yeah,
standardly. Yeah.
but your take doesn't make sense either that the universe
Well,
just
it
always
does.
existed. That also doesn't make sense.
Well, you don't even. Of course, why doesn't that make sense? For,
Explain how the universe has always existed.
yeah, yeah. For every day that you go back, there was just one more, the nth degree, right? Like you can just have like an infinite set of days in the past.
Well, then now would never be have happened because we would be stuck in forever
No,
ago.
no, because that would only be true of an infinite causal chain that began, right? But you can have an infinite causal chain that didn't begin. So for every day you go, like you traverse backwards, there's just an end to the nth degree.
If you have an infinite line and you mark an infinite line where you are now, and then you
Yes,
go
but
back in time and to the start of this infinite line, you will never reach
no,
where you
because
are now because it's infinite.
you're already question begging, because what the atheist or something is saying is that there's no start to the line now. It just goes back infinitely. So you don't have like a start or something. It's like a circle, right? Like you just have, for every day you traverse backwards, you just go to the m plus one, right? There's no beginning to the chain. It just goes back infinitely.
I mean, I guess
Yeah.
I don't think that's any less feasible than the than there being a start.
Well,
That sounds just as unrealistic as there being a start.
it obviously, just to be clear, like it obviously is if you including in the hypothesis a whole new type of ontology. right? If you're including something that is non-spatial or non-temporal and non-natural, that's completely you're inventing a new ontology. It's obviously more improbable there.
Okay, I mean, I think you're just gonna outsmart me here, and I'm not gonna be able to keep up. So I'm just gonna say, okay, can we
But there's
circle back to?
yeah, there's
I'm
like
gonna be
Let's
honest.
take
I can
a
give
I'm
you
gonna be
another.
honest. I'm gonna throw in the towel when I know I'm being out intellectualed.
let's take a sidetrack here. I've got a question from YouTube that I want to try to answer, and maybe that the panel here can have something to say about it too. Quality Depression asks, what our thoughts are on abiogenesis. Is an atheist, and the most compelling to me is that there could be a god or something like a simulation. I will say first on the simulation that to me the simulation idea doesn't really matter because it does seem to be that our universe is consistent. So if it's a simulation, so be it. It's well written. So um, abiogenesis is basically going from the inorganic atoms to small molecules like amino acids, eventually to nucleic acids, and then eventually into larger chain things and single cell life, and then evolution takes over from there. It does seem to be as time goes on and the research is collecting that that is what happened. There are many, many, many avenues of study on this right now. I will give out a recommendation to go on Facebook, everybody, and look up abiogenesis. There's a person who goes by that name, and he puts up posts literally daily about new research in that field, and it's really just kind of a fascinating thing to be. Um, Also, want to mention that there was in the news about 2 weeks ago. We had gotten back the material from an asteroid that we went to like a year ago or something. They got it back. They opened it up cleanly, and they found not only all of the amino acids that exist on Earth, but all five nucleic acids that make up RNA and DNA. So all you have to do is basically get the process started because we know that those small molecules come into being naturally given certain environmental circumstances and the atoms like carbon and nitrogen and oxygen and heat and hydrogen. So it's all you have to do is start to build a small chain of two or three or five or six that gets to the point of being able to replicate itself, and from there it just kind of continues to take over. So at this point in history, that is a very viable process, even though we still don't understand. Conceptually, it's viable. Still don't understand the hows, and there's probably many avenues that they're discovering possibilities that will probably turn out to be not the way it happened. But it seems to be a quite robust research field right now.
Yeah.
Anybody want to add to that?
No, I'm not like I don't know much about like biochemistry and stuff, so I'm gonna stay out of this. My girlfriend does that stuff, so
Yeah, I don't really know a ton, but is this supporting the like that we're like not the only like life form in the universe? Is that
Well,
like
for
what this is
sure. I
supporting?
mean, this particular asteroid is kind of cool because if there's nucleic acids out there, because one of the hypotheses is panspermia, which says that these could have come from another planet and that's seeded Earth, and that's how it got started on Earth. Now that doesn't still answer the question because then you just say, well, how did it happen on that planet? But it looks quite feasible that it could be that it looks like Mars had an atmosphere and surface water earlier in the solar system, and it it could have had, if not bacterial life, certainly the building blocks of life. So if that was a period of time when there was still bombardment happening, you would also get that material, that planet hit, because we know it's hit by asteroids throughout long history, and that stuff thrown up into the solar system that could get to Earth. So it could have happened on Mars. That's one of the reasons people want to get to Mars, to see if they can find evidence of bacterial fossils.
yeah. Isn't it? Haven't they found like? Well, they have like a similar hypothesis for one of the moons on Saturn, right? There's like an ice sheet on the top, and then underneath there's like water, supposedly.
Yeah, but the
Yeah.
reason I
Mhm.
point to Mars is because it's more likely that something could have gone from
Yeah.
Mars to Earth than from a moon of Jupiter, just
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
sheer distance and other places it could have gone. But
Mhm.
yes, you're right. There could have been. I don't think we know enough about those those moons. I mean, one of the moons is still volcanic now, so it
Yeah.
hasn't cooled down to the point where it probably could have life. But maybe in 500 million years, it'll be at the same place that
Mhm.
Earth was because it has a heat source, right? It has internal
So,
heat.
do you believe that the universe is like infinite?
Um,
Appears to be.
yeah, it maybe we don't know because we can only see our observable universe. There's probably more outside of that.
There is, yeah.
So
Well,
the thing is that there is probably most likely life in other systems, galaxies. Again, the thing is that what we've tried to ask ourselves is why haven't we been visited? And that's where the Fermi paradox comes into play of trying to explain or give hypotheses on why we haven't seen other life. If there's
hey, the
so
pyramids.
many,
No, I'm just
yeah.
kidding.
Well, I think that's pretty. I think those kind of like the Fermi paradox, at least. I think those are kind of like easy to respond to, though, right? Like the most likely hypothesis or the most likely whereabouts of life would be closer to the beginning of the universe, right? Because we just find that as we look out into the background radiation or something, things are more simple, obviously because of just how long light takes to travel to us. So they're more complex there. So the likelihood is around like the beginning of the universe is where life would have existed or has existed,
Not
and it's because it's
necessarily, not necessarily, because remember the early universe was mostly hydrogen and helium. And to have life, you need
mm,
something more complex. So you may need a generation or two of star formation and large
But
enough stars to become supernovas to spread.
but they would have had that time, right? Because there's like 13.8 billion years, presumably.
Do you?
Yes, right.
Yeah,
Well, right. Yeah.
yeah,
Given
yeah.
that our sun is a third generation stars, and also given that larger suns turn themselves over quicker. So
the
Yeah,
Fermi
exactly. Like
paradox.
they've had the most time to develop. That's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah.
so that would be the most complex. So if you just take that kind of like that's where life would like is most probable, at least to like Brian Cox or something. So if you
Yeah.
just take that kind of explanation, then it's pretty easy to explain why people haven't visited or some other civilization hasn't visited us. Just from the fact that the only way to get to us within our lifetime would be to have like some wormhole or something.
I mean,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
thing is, like, there's like 6 or 7 kind of like basic understandings of kind of why maybe we haven't been visited by aliens. Like, maybe intelligent life is really hard to get to, like, break that certain level that we're at, or like, again,
Maybe
you
they
can't
haven't for the same
travel,
reason we haven't visited them.
or you can't travel faster than
Well,
the
we're
speed
not
of light.
not technological. Well, the idea is that they've had more time to become more technological than we
Yeah.
have.
Or like you can't travel faster than the speed of light, so it will never like or like you destroy yourselves at a certain point, so they never get to that point.
I
So there's like several
Or
different
the
reasons on kind of why
Or maybe
we
we're the
yeah.
only superior intelligence in the universe.
Uptown.
Well,
I
that's
mean,
really
okay,
unlikely.
even
hold on,
feasible.
hold on a second. Uptown anti-realist gives a explanation. Low oxygen worlds don't allow for combustion, which is essential for technology. There's another. That's a good point. That's a good factor too.
So does that mean
I mean,
all
even
the other
if we had
planets
another
would
13 million years or 13 billion years or a trillion years to keep advancing, do we even have the means of production available to
Yes.
accomplish something like that?
Yeah, we
no
do.
We've been
We do.
Here
no
on Earth, we
no
do.
Given
no
given the resources of the asteroid belt, we'd
no
have to
so
take those.
with
so
with what we have in our current technology, we could build a generational ship. We have the technology and knowledge right now to build it. We just don't have the wherewithal to do it. But we could build a generational ship and send that out through the universe. But the other thing, there's lots of other things to consider about the Fermi paradox, is that there could be worlds with intelligent life that is advanced technology, but they do not have the desire to explore, so they are happy just living on their world. Their reproduction rates might be much different than what we experience, and so they have no desire to go outside their solar system or world, or they could be developed, but their gravity in their system is so large that they can't leave their planet, and they could be highly developed and not leaving their planet. There's so many.
Would they
Maybe
be
they
able to
already came
age
here
the
and we
way
were still
we
just
age,
amoebas.
though?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, Denny, is that we only have an X amount of years left on the Earth unless we can stop the sun from doing its thing. Because in about 1 billion years, the Earth will be torched, and there will be no life on the Earth in 1 billion years.
Three.
Is it 3? Okay, it's 3 billion.
We got at least 3.
3
Yeah.
billion years.
Where
So,
the sun will expand, yeah.
Relax. We got
so
3.
I mean,
actually, it won't
There,
explode.
there's no way something doesn't wipe us out before 3 billion years.
That's
No.
that's the other big thing, is that the idea, because the two ideas, I think, as I've read, the two prominent ideas are that one is just space is really so damn big that it's really hard to get here, and that civilizations tend to go extinct when they get to a certain level of technology. It's almost unavoidable. They start to deal with forces that are so big that they can't survive.
Something happens, like an asteroid hits you, or
that could happen.
Do you all believe in the like infinite reality theory of if the universe is infinite, then there are infinite versions of us, infinite versions of me,
I mean, that's
infinite
just
versions of
trivial.
you out there?
When that's
How,
trivial.
if the universe
That's trivial.
is infinite, are there not infinite
Yeah,
possibilities?
that's trivially true. Yeah, that's trivially true. Like, if there's finite matter in an infinite universe, then it's just trivially true that there's an infinite set of
I
possible
believe in it.
things.
I agree with you. I believe in that. But Host shook his head no.
Not an infinite universe.
It's too far out for me. I mean,
So
the idea that there are, the multiverse theory kind of goes along that way. But so I would think that if something like that is true, it wouldn't be here. It would be multiple other universes. But the others, the level 1 multiverse, which is to say that there are areas of our universe that have different laws of physics and stuff, to me that seems much less likely.
Not different laws of physics. It's like the world that's exactly the same, except you blinked a second ago instead of
that's just
a second from now.
That's a little too weird for my brain, but I'm not a physicist, so
that's not that idea.
The
monkey
can't
typewriter
happen
theory.
unless people don't age, like unless a being doesn't age, because age is going to play a big factor in being infinite, right?
Well, that's not a human being infinite, but we're not. There's a difference between an infinite universe as far as size, or that there's no end. It goes on both ways, and time being infinite, and an infinite and a multiverse. When you're talking about multiple versions of you, that's a multiverse. That has no relation to the universe being infinite.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of true, but yeah, like I don't know. I just don't subscribe to like any kind of theory of the universe being infinite. I think I'm right in saying that most physicists take the view that we have like some big bounce or like big crunch theory, right? Like the universe expands to a point and then collapses in on itself, and then it expands.
That's one of the hypotheses.
I think that's the one they like most accept, right? Like maybe I'm tripping. I think Dr. Blitz, the PhD guy on here, he holds to that, but
I don't think there's any sort of agreement on that. There's not a consensus on the beyond what we can observe. There's several different hypotheses on it, but even those don't postulate. You have
there being no agreement or evidence doesn't dismiss or confirm anything.
Right. It's all hypothesis. We can't observe it. We can't observe anything about it. So we can just make up ideas and say, yeah, we think this might be it or something. But that's why it doesn't become a theory.
Can we use our reality as evidence, or our world as evidence? I mean, nothing is infinite in our world, right?
Yeah, I mean, our world is evidence, but it's only a data point of 1. That's the problem. problem with making predictions off of it. And we can make predictions according to like chemistry, for example, you know, how reactive carbon is versus oxygen and things like that. But there are too many variables at play here to make too much prediction.
Oh, and then just quickly, like, the other piece of evidence against theism, to bring it back on topic slightly, I think that the problem of evil, like, is pretty strong evidence against, like, at least like Christianity or like Islam or something.
The
Not
problem
the
of evil,
logical
like
problem.
temptation.
The problem of
No,
evil?
like,
Explain the problem of evil, please.
Yeah.
yeah, sure. So look, just quickly, like, okay, if God is all good, then the expectation that there's like evil exists is not predicted under theism. Like, Alex O'Connor gives like a good like explanation. Like, you can say, yeah, there might be some explanation that the theist can give for why evil exists human to human, but you might not be able to give like a good explanation or a good account of why animals suffer like so
Well,
intently in the animal kingdom or something.
I mean, because in the grand scheme of things,
That's real. I like that.
in the grand scheme of things, if both of your parents get cancer and die in a horrible car accident and burn, that seems like pretty bad. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not even really that like evil. It's kind of irrelevant to
Yeah,
life.
but presumably
It might
God
be evil to you.
but just quickly, like, presumably God could have made a world in which none of those things happened and he was still like they were still part of the moral community, right?
Yeah.
Like,
But
just kind of
but he
I
didn't.
mean,
There you go.
It can
yeah, he didn't.
it
But
can take away the significance of it from an evolutionary scale, right? None of us will be remembered and all that stuff. It doesn't really matter, but it matters to us. But when you've got a God that is taught to being all good and cares about us and loves us and all this other stuff, the obvious thing that it doesn't intervene during childhood cancer and all, and you know, tsunamis that take out 200,000 people is evidence of absence, basically.
I
yeah,
mean, I disagree because I still think that suffrage is good. Suffering is the point of life, in my opinion. I think that like without
Why do
if there was no
animals suffer?
suffering, then we would constantly be suffering because we would have
But
no perception of what suffering is. If cancer
but
didn't
why
exist,
do
then something would take its place. There will
So
why
always
do
be
animals
suffering because it's
suffer?
just human perception.
okay,
Why do
so
animals
Okay,
suffer?
hold on.
Well, animals are irrelevant.
Let's go
But
with
why?
Ralph because I haven't heard Ralph for a bit. Go ahead, Ralph.
so with that idea, so the hard thing to accept with that is one is that in at least the Christian mythology, the Abrahamic is you started with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and everything was great, and there was fellowship with God, there was no suffering and all that. So if there's a need for suffering, there was a point where it wasn't needed. And on the flip side, if you look into like what happens at the end, you go to heaven or the rapture or whatever you want to call it, all this stuff happens. And eventually we're all in heaven and everything's happy and stuff. And, you know, I'm in hell, whatever. Some people are in hell, but some people are in heaven. And then in heaven, you don't have suffering. You're just happy. You worship God, whatever. Well, now you don't need suffering. So we only need suffering for a tiny part of time. That doesn't make sense to say it's needed if it's
Because
not needed.
God gave us heaven on earth, which is the story of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve made the decision using free will, which we have established most likely exists. They made the decision to introduce suffering into heaven on earth, separating God from man, creating earth, which is no longer the utopia which you addressed that Adam and Eve was. And that's why we have suffering. It's because
Right.
God is
That's your
all good, but
explanation.
humans are not.
That's your
Wait,
explanation of
hold on,
why
Danny. Let me ask
suffering.
you.
That's your explanation of why suffering exists, but it doesn't explain why it's needed.
Yeah.
And your earlier quote was that it was needed. We needed to be who we are or whatever, but it's not needed, obviously, by the story. And if God didn't want that to happen, that the free choice element where Adam and Eve eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, well, heck, I don't put poisonous candy in the room with my baby and just tell my baby not to eat it and walk away.
I
That's
mean, I
that's
agree with
Facts.
you.
the silliest
I mean,
idea.
Facts.
I agree with you. There's also the religious explanation of Lucifer being cast from heaven. I mean, I agree with you though. And somebody in the comments just said Danny is not agnostic on any subject. The reason I'm using these labels, the reason I'm saying God, the reason I'm saying Adam and Eve is because they're the labels in which I tie my interpretation in. It doesn't mean that I am saying I believe in Adam and Eve. I'm saying I use Adam and Eve for my simple little human mind to interpret what I don't understand. Somebody who's Buddhist may use something else. At the end of the day, it's the same thing. Earlier, you used that red car example. The more specific you get about the car, the less probable it is that it exists. Well, I believe that we will never understand what the car is. So no matter how specific we get on the car, when we go outside and take a look, yes, we'll be wrong, but there will be something there. And we all
Okay.
may have a different idea of what that something is, but it is there and we will never understand it.
I mean, the other
That's
kind of
why I put the labels of Christianity
Yeah.
on it, because that's my interpretation for what I do not understand.
Why do you think
the other kind.
we'll never understand complex things?
Because I don't think that we can understand anything that's higher than us. And like the same way a dog cannot understand a human, the way bacteria cannot understand a dog, we don't understand anything above our level.
Well, we've been progressing intellectually, not intellectually. We've been well, maybe we are, but I don't know. We've been progressing as a knowledge base for thousands of years. I mean, look at how much knowledge we have compared to the 1800s.
That doesn't mean it
but-
was ever above our level. It's always been
Well-
in our realm of possibility to understand. But
Until quantum physics, actually.
But how do we know what our limit is if we don't know what
Yeah.
our limit is?
Yeah.
we don't. And that's what
Exactly.
I think the point of one of the reasons of life is. I think one of the points of life is to try and come as close to understanding what you can't understand, which is kind
But
of an
then-
acceptance of religion. My acceptance of Christianity is my attempt at understanding something I recognize I will never understand. And I recognize I'm probably wrong about, but according to my religion, the fact that I'm accepting something, it means that I am giving grace to my creator, which
Okay.
is shared among most religions. Like, I don't
as
believe
soon
that
as you
Buddhists
say,
go to
as soon
hell
as
or-
you say according to my religion, that's where you lose me. Because when you say according to my religion, then you're stopping with a certain set
Yes.
of a book that has a certain interpretation, and you're stopping with there. What's nice about science is that we never stop. We always try to go one step further. And when we learn something new, like we recently, well, whatever, 12 years ago now, had evidence for the Higgs boson. Well, now we can ask, well, now what does that imply? Because now this thing that was hypothesized before we know now is real. So there is.
I mean,
So we don't have a limit. I don't see why you put a
well,
limit
well,
on
where I
yourself,
was going with
force
what
the
my
limit on
religion,
yourself.
when I said my religion, what I was going to go into was gratitude. How can science explain the principle of gratitude?
Why does it have to?
I mean,
I
my
mean,
religion,
what is
my religion
gratitude
can
is
explain the
okay. That was probably too evasive of me. So let me take another stab at it. Gratitude is one of those abstract things. It's like value, right? It's not a physical thing that exists in the universe. It's just like the concept of good versus bad, better versus worse, except when there's functional stuff. So we're gonna understand things like gratitude probably on a neurological basis down the road. And Uptown Anti-Realist says, as a neurophilosophy grad student, we can explain it at the level of the brain, and our neurological understanding is getting more and more advanced.
like releasing dopamine and whatnot. I understand that.
I mean,
Yeah,
the big
much
thing
more
is just
complex.
saying. The big thing is saying we can't explain something or we don't know something now means we can't explain it is false, because if you go back in time, you have people saying there's no way you can fly.
Yeah,
There's no way you can break the sound barrier. You just can't do it. It's impossible. We don't understand that. There's this limit, and you can go on and on. There's so many things that people said are impossible or it's beyond our understanding, and they eventually get proven wrong. That's over and over and over and over
It
again.
sounds like, to me, it sounds like you're going against atheism, though. Because if you go to somebody 300 years
Atheism,
ago and
athe-
try to prove to them planes, you're not going to be able to. So they're going to say, you can't prove that to me. Therefore, it will never happen and never will exist just
atheism
because they
is
don't understand it.
atheism is only a question. Is only one question. It's a conclusion to one question. So
Is that question, is there a God?
yeah, that's all it is. So it's possible, I mean, especially if you're like me, you're an agnostic atheist, you realize you'll never 100% be able to prove or disprove a God, but it just seems less and less likely. Just like I keep using the analogy of Thor and thunder. You know, once you
This whole
have
time, I did not know you were an agnostic atheist. I thought you were full on just there's no God.
no, sorry,
Yeah.
agnostic atheist.
I
A
mean,
little bit different.
we
Yeah.
believe that I believe there is no God, but I don't know. But I can tell you that I am really highly confident that the Abrahamic God does not exist. So my confident level
I don't
on
want to disagree with that.
no my confidence level on certain gods are much higher.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two scenarios. There's a scenario that there is a God, and that there's a scenario that there isn't a God. I think in the scenario where there is a God, we would have no understanding of him, and we won't, or that the higher entity.
So then
So
that
therefore, if we
means
are living in
sorry,
reality,
go ahead.
if we're living in the reality where there is a God and we don't have an understanding, obviously we're going to have quote unquote made up stories to fulfill our explanation in our human mind.
I
Wait,
just
hold
feel
on. I
I just feel
disagree
like
with that. Hold
I
on.
just feel like you just made up a story
Hold on,
to
Bondo.
answer your question on why there's no evidence for your God. I just feel
Bondo,
like you made up
let
an answer.
Midwest speak here. What were you going to say, Midwest?
Just that doesn't make sense, because if there's a God and he's the all-knowing, almighty, all-perfect being, then what is the purpose of him putting humanity through what we've gone through since
Okay,
the
well,
beginning of humans?
what
Why does there need to be a purpose for us to go and study and have to feel and go to church and find out that there's a God when he is God? Why does he have to prove that he's God when
why are
he
you
is
saying
God?
that he's almighty, all powerful? Like, that's evidence from one, maybe multiple religions. That doesn't necessarily that mean there's true. Maybe there's a God and he isn't almighty and all powerful. That is just as
Okay,
feasible.
so that's the realm of there's other gods.
I think there's a God in which we do not have a full understanding of. The Christian understanding is that he's all powerful and almighty. That doesn't necessarily mean that that definitely doesn't mean it's accurate. It's just as
Bro,
feasible that
you
there's a
sound
God who
like
isn't
you
almighty.
sound like Greek mythology, like Zeus and Hades and all that. Like I get what you're saying.
I think Greek mythology is just as feasible as Christianity, which is just as feasible as Buddhism, which is just as feasible as Hinduism.
But does it make sense to you for any being that is more powerful than us to have to demonstrate that they are what they are?
Yes. I do it all the time playing Minecraft.
Oh, snap.
Fuck Minecraft. Minecraft is for idiots. What I'm
You
saying
should see how
is,
many Sims I've tortured.
Why would it
Relaxing.
say that?
Okay, I don't mean that. I play Minecraft myself. I have an account. You guys can check me out, Midwest. But what I'm saying is, there's no reason for a god to demonstrate that he's a god.
Well, he clearly
Why
doesn't
would he
demonstrate that
need
he's a god.
I mean, clearly it's subjective, apparently, Midwest.
Yeah, he does not care whether, I mean, he does care, but obviously he doesn't care to the extent where he's doing everything he can to make you believe in him, or else you definitely would believe in him.
Well, may I ask a question?
And he created a realm where none of us will ever
Is that Oz?
know of him.
Oz?
Yeah.
He also wants all of us to worship.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, let me ask y'all something. Do y'all really believe that there is absolutely no evidence of God?
None.
I don't. I believe there is some.
demonstrate
Okay, good.
evidence outside
Thank you,
personal
host. That's
experience.
very genuine. James, give me a second, man. You just came up here. All right. What about here? I'll give you one good reason to why I'm not convinced of the atheist way of life, and that's
Okay.
a philosophical concept called the origins, or not even the original thought. The original thought. Yeah, have y'all ever thought about that
What's
and how man
what
is
is the
frontal
incapable?
lobe
what is
developed?
the original thought?
The original thought is the concept that man is incapable of like originating their own thoughts. Like they have to observe something in order to come up with an idea.
No.
So for example,
We know that we're born with a certain amount of innate information.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you, host. Now I agree with you because I believe God gave us a knowledge to start with.
That comes
Adam,
from evolution,
for
just
example.
like other animals. It's a.
Well,
I mean,
no,
it's
no,
a
no.
basic. It's basic. It's like things
That's
like
your perspective.
no. This
Now,
is
mind
science.
you,
This is
with
science
evolution,
How an
I
ant
don't see how
studies
that
built.
of infant
contradicts.
studies from the 60s. Being aware of things like gravity and heights and things like that, and we've seen in other species things like birds know how to build a nest and etc. Those things go from generation to generation without being
No,
taught.
no. You see, birds. They have a knowledge that's limited. They can't
Sure.
go beyond that knowledge, and they were born with it. And
Yeah,
that is
that's
evidence
what I'm
on its
saying.
own that species was giving that specific type of knowledge. Now, the intellectual species that you call humans, like you and me, we were giving intellect, and we were also given knowledge to start with, because God knows us better than we know ourselves, and He knows we have to begin with something.
Do you believe in
Not
evolution?
No, I don't believe in evolution.
That's
Why
what I
does that
thought.
knowledge
Okay.
have to be given?
No, no, absolutely not. I believe
How
I
do
believe
you-
in the first man and woman. I believe alongside with their creation, God gave them knowledge to start with. I believe He also gave them a task, and He wanted them to commit the evil act of eating from the tree in order to make their first independent choice. After they made that first independent choice, which was an evil act, God gave them the knowledge of repentance.
Okay, well, let me simplify this a little bit because we know Adam and Eve didn't exist. We know that that's a story. So you can look at it as
Fiction.
as a
I'm sorry.
metaphor of some sort.
Do you believe that with absolute? Do you believe that's absolute fact?
Yes.
They
Yes.
don't
Yes. At this
Yes.
point, that's about as factual
Yes.
as a circle not being a square.
Okay, so let me ask you, host. Do you believe the Big Bang was an actual fact?
Yes, the expansion we know happened. Yeah, we're
Do you know
comfortable.
that the Big
We're
Bang was
comfortable
an
with that
actual
down
fact?
to. Say, go ahead.
Do you believe the Big Bang is an actual fact?
Yeah. We
And
know the
can you-
expansion happened. We don't know why the expansion began, but we do know the expansion happened.
Okay, now do you believe it's an absolute fact?
Yes.
Bro,
You
he's
can
saying
Google
yes.
At
scientific
this point in
evidence of
history,
it
yes,
being
yes,
a
we
fact.
have we have
With the
evidence of it.
concept,
Yes.
with the concept of time, and you, I don't know what you measured in, but do you know anything about philosophy, sir?
A little bit.
Okay, have you ever looked into the original thought concept?
No.
Okay, you do realize that human beings do not have the capability of having an original thought. They have to observe
That's
something in order to
ridiculous.
make
This
up
is a
something.
dumb take.
No, no, I'm
ridiculous.
not making it up. I promise you. You can Google it yourself there, bud.
All right, I'll Google
There's
it.
lots of ridiculous
Kind
concepts.
of like the mystery of the wheel. Whoever came up with the wheel, but we do know that somebody somewhere saw a rock fall, tumble down a hill, and that's how he came up with the idea of the wheel. You have
Wait,
to
hold on, man. What do babies do in the womb?
What? Explain.
Do they swim? Do they move their arms?
Elaborate.
Babies, like fetuses in the womb, they swim.
What's your point?
They have nothing to demonstrate how to swim.
What is your point, Midwest? Do you
The
believe
point is,
you believe they're
humans
swimming?
don't need a
Do you believe they're
demonstration to
swimming
find
in the room
intelligence.
like a
It's
swimming
pretty
pool?
much no.
Do you
I'm
believe?
saying humans don't need a demonstration of because of our superior intelligence to obviously the animals. We don't need really a demonstration on how to do something. We
No, you
figure it out.
absolutely do. From the moment you come out that womb, you observe the things
No,
around
no, no.
you, and you
Inside the
learn
womb,
that way.
babies are
Bro's
swimming,
making me
right?
feel smart.
They're moving their arms, right? They touch the umbilical cord, they wiggle their toes.
Midwest, moving your
They blink.
arms, that's an ability that you have. You don't need to be taught to move your arm.
That's the point.
Your mind can control that.
I'm going to give you a
You
book.
just-
I'm going to
you-
put up a book recommendation while you're talking here. Just give me a second. Go ahead. Keep going.
So I looked at the original thought and just looked it up and read some of the stuff. And sure, it's just stating that we don't have a truly original thought that's not influenced by something in our experience or life or something we saw. And sure, I grant you that, but depending on what you say,
Isn't that theory
influences
dismissed
you.
by quantum physics?
But
Absolutely not.
but
The concept that you
but
bring
how does
up,
that even
that man created God,
us?
in
let me
order for
finish.
that to be possible, you have to observe another.
Please don't overtalk.
No,
One
no,
at
no,
a
I
time,
won't.
One at a time.
You need to observe another living, breathing creature create
Can I say
a
something?
completely
No,
other
that's-
living, breathing creature for you to come up with the idea of God. You can come up with the idea of enhanced attributes like a Superman, but that does not give you the concept of God.
Yes,
That's
it
just
does.
wrong.
No,
We observe
no,
the cosmos. We observe volcanoes going off. We observe the naturalness of the earth, and they've attributed it to some god.
They just
No, sir. You do
that's
not
just
see.
Science
making-
proves that
no,
those
You
are
don't
just
see
storms.
the natural
Us.
disasters
Okay.
around you
Okay.
Us.
Okay.
Let me-
Too
and
much.
then attribute that
Too
to
much
God.
Too much over talking. We know that religion goes all the way back to animism, and God concepts come from there. We try to attribute way back before we possibly even before we even had language, how to prevent bad things from happening. Blaming others on the weather, blaming the wind spirits and things like this. Those concepts came before what we
Or the
consider
Red Sea party.
The modern. No, that's way later.
We can
Way
demonstrate
later.
this.
If you looked into anthropology of religion, it's fairly clear the sequence of how God concepts came to be, and they typically went from animism to shamanism to polytheism, and eventually to
Can I tell you a
monism.
story from World War
Now,
II?
mind you, before Aminism, I need to look into that.
Animism.
Before Aminism, whatever it is, there was a way of life. Now, mind you, there is only one religion in the world that truly has a way of life. Now, I can explain that.
What?
We're talking caveman type things with animism. Animism is like they think that inanimate things were animated, that they had purposes and beings, much like Native American things, that they believe in bear spirits and things like that.
Misinterpretation.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's a
So
story.
none of that
shows-
requires a super original thought that has no. It all comes from something.
Oh,
So it
no,
doesn't-
exactly. They
So
observed some. I'm
your
sorry.
original thought hypothesis does not generate any evidence of a god.
Right.
It doesn't lead to that. In order for us to have a god concept, we need to have there has to actually a god exist.
Are you the one?
I don't
who-
understand. Therefore, magic.
Hey, are you the one, Ralph, who looked up the original thought concept?
Yep.
Okay, so do you believe in the definition of that to an extent?
I believe it's kind of ridiculous, and it's a philosophical thing of saying that sure, every thought has some basis, because you can't separate our minds from our experiences, because we are our experiences. So yes, everything you think of is going to have some origin in something else. And the idea of original thought is that we don't have anything, that we think of that doesn't have some background in some other experience or something we observed or did or something has a basis.
So let me ask you something then, Ralph. If that's the case, what is the difference between man and the monkeys that we have alive today? How come they didn't overcome the wildlife
Question.
abilities that they have?
That is a great question. That is a great question.
So how come they didn't evolve and we did?
Because they evolved differently than we did. It's all in the evolutionary tree, right? They're cousins to us. It doesn't. Evolution isn't designed to create a higher thinking, learned creature. It's just evolution is a path.
Wait a minute. You can teach monkeys how to do sign language.
That's irrelevant.
Evolution is just
very few.
Survival
a monkey
of
how
the
to paint.
species, and it's over generations. It's not a path to create human thinking.
So, Ralph, do you believe that we all came from one species of monkey, or there was different versions?
Monkey.
I believe all the 8 families share a common ancestor.
Okay, and only one
and all
Ralph?
those mammals share a common ancestor. And going back, and there's more common ancestry as you go back. It's a tree.
Okay. Now, do you have factual evidence of this?
Genetics.
We have lots of factual evidence on it.
Show me one factual evidence.
Dude, take an 8-year course in evolution. I mean, go to a
the Phoenix Science Museum.
Go to a museum. I mean, come on, you're on TikTok. We're not gonna give you evidence on TikTok.
Host. With all due respect, they're all theories.
Go look up DNA.
They're hypotheses.
No,
there is no absolute.
You realize what century we're living in? You realize we're in the 21st century, that we have museums now, and we have people who have studied this from generations after generation since Darwin's time forward, and Mendel's time in terms of genetics in the early 1900s. We know this stuff now.
Do
Okay.
you know the difference between a hypothesis and a theory?
Absolutely, I do, sir. Now, Ralph,
right. So evolution is not a hypothesis.
Ralph. Pivoting. When I was scrolling through TikTok, I ran into a TikTok channel that shows a society in God knows where, Africa or wherever, and they were recording these guys who in their society they're not advanced and stuff like that, and they still act like back in the day, for out of respect. We're going to say that if you took a child, a baby, and you put him in the middle of the jungle and hope to God this child survives, how do you think he would? What would he learn growing up? Do you think he would randomly learn how to speak English and do the things we do here in the States?
Why would he learn English if he was not taught English?
He would die almost immediately.
How is this proving the existence of God at all?
He learns what he observes, correct?
Sure. You can only learn up to the level of what your brain capacity is.
Can I tell a quick story that kind of has a little bit of meaning
to
in
an
this?
extent, even idiots can be much elevated with their IQ.
Oz, hold on one sec. James has a point to make. Go ahead, James.
Well, I have seen several different times on this story in World War II where we landed on an island where there was indigenous people, right? In World War II, we took over this island. We brought them chocolate bars they've never seen before, clothing. They saw the helicopters, all this stuff, Yeah. And at some point, the war ended, and we left this island, right? 20 years later, they came back, and these people had created mock helicopters to pray to. They had created these little chocolate bars out of fucking rocks or mud or whatever, and they were part of their religion that they had created because we visited them.
Cargo cults.
So what does that tell you?
What they
Wait,
can't
what was the
understand.
point again? What was the point of
What
that?
does that tell you?
That tells me that they believe in a creator, and they've never seen anything like a helicopter. They never seen anything like the things that came out of that helicopter, and they
Right.
attributed it as that is the creator.
Exactly.
You are born with the idea that a creator exists. Where
I
did
don't
that
think they
idea
saw us as
come from?
creator.
You are
No,
not born with an idea that a creator exists.
No.
No.
No, it's part of our evolution that we want to explain the unexplainable.
Yeah,
We want to put an
that
answer.
goes into my
We want to
argument.
put an answer to the questions we
Hold
have
on. Danny,
about
Danny.
where did that lightning bolt come from, or why did that volcano erupt,
Exactly.
or why are we here?
Exactly. That's
What's the
why
purpose?
those
We
questions
have a
you
lot
ask-
of questions that
Yes.
that
Those
evolution
questions-
involves
those
in us,
questions
and
lead
because
to a thought.
answering the questions, trying to answer the questions, leads to a greater chance of survival. You might not get it right, but trying to answer the questions leads to a greater chance of survival.
Wait, what he
Survival
just said.
is evolution. So having the question and not knowing the answer and then just attributing that to something because you want an answer does not make that thing true.
That's a straw man, Ralph. Relax.
What he just said
Danny-
sounds like if I'm walking
Hold on.
and I eat a jelly donut and a part of that jelly donut falls on the ground and a bunch of ants go and harvest it and take it back to their nest, they believe that the drop of jelly donut was a god.
No, that's not the case.
Those are ants.
We're referring to human beings, intellectual creatures, Midwest. Danny, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that supports the whole island story, supports my statement of religion is an explanation for what we cannot understand, which is my evidence for there is things we do not understand. I think that atheism in principle is an acceptance that we will understand everything eventually.
Exactly.
That's
And I
what
think that that's wrong. I think there are things that we
So
are
if you
incapable of
Hear
understanding.
me out.
Danny.
If you take a Tarzan, a kid that was raised in the jungle, and then you bring him to New York City, eventually that kid will become one of us. He'll learn. He'll start to comprehend things on what to do and how to speak on an intellectual level. He'll expand.
Yes, he has a brain.
Yes.
What's
of
that
course.
prove, though?
So that proves the original thought concept.
No.
That proves that you learn from what you observe.
Well, yes,
Okay,
but
even
that's
if
not the
it
original
does,
thought,
how
though.
does that prove a god at all? I'm literally religious and I'm Christian, and you are scrambling my brain.
I'm sorry.
Me and you are on the same side here, and I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, what are you confused about?
Wait a minute. Hold on a second, Os. Danny,
How
I
does this
wanna-
original thought theory even prove that there is a god?
Danny, I want to address
The
something.
original thought concept proves that the idea of God was given to the first man and woman. When God created Adam and Eve, he gave them knowledge to start with, and then they were taught that they were created by this God. That's where we got the idea of God.
I realize
It
the
started
Bible's,
disagree.
the
I don't
Bible's
think that
only,
has to be
the Bible's only 2,500 years old, and humans have been around for 300,000.
No, the Abrahamic
There are
Abrahamic
stories
line
from
goes
the
all way
Bible
back
that were
to Adam.
repeated for thousands of years before that.
I'm pretty sure humans predate the Bible.
Pretty sure you're right. By a long,
Yeah,
long
ironically, we're
time.
talking about the very first-
Civilization way
That's the
predates.
thing. That's the thing. You can't implement your beliefs within my belief. My belief is there was a first man and woman. Your belief is evolution.
So
Monkey.
can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah, go
In
for it.
this day and age, if we all came from one man and one woman, this would be provable through genetics. There would be a link between every single human on this planet genetically.
Aren't we actually all linked genetically? Like I just read
No, we
somewhere
all
like a
have the
little while
same
ago
DNA. We are not
I was
linked
just about
genetically.
to say that, Dan.
that you're like related to somebody like
James,
We share DNA.
within
We are
like
not related.
16
we are
trees or
linked
something.
to an
Okay,
extent.
then let me form it like this. If we all came from one man and one woman, how do we get different races?
Well, it's
we
kind of
came, we
it's kind
came
of funny.
from.
race
If
is a
we all came from
Wait. Let me clarify one thing here. So you can take the maternal lineage back, the one woman thing, because of mitochondria comes from the mother. We just because we can do some DNA back stepping does not mean it was one man and one woman specifically. It's like there's a woman about 6,000 years ago, or no, actually no, sorry, 60,000 years ago, somewhere in Africa, and there's a male, who knows where. It's not, they weren't a couple.
Right.
We can trace the female lineage. Male lineage is very difficult to trace because it's
Right.
so
But you
diverse.
gotta admit that it could.
Mitochondria
That's
is the only.
facts. I remember reading that. That's facts.
Yeah.
Host. You say that it doesn't mean that, but it could mean it. Correct?
No.
No.
The evidence is what it is. And we know that the mitochondrial DNA only comes from the mother because there are no mitochondria in a sperm. There are mitochondria in eggs.
So the intellectual human beings that evolved from the one monkey species, if you trace that down, are we all connected in a way? It's the same concept.
We're all connected down to a single cell.
It's
which
literally
comes from
the exact
abiogenesis
same
before
thing.
that.
It's the same thing me saying Adam and Eve. What are you saying? Why are you
It is
refuting what I'm
completely different from Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve is a creation concept that
No, sir.
that
It starts with one. It starts with
let me
one.
finish my
one
sentences.
evolutional
Let
path.
me finish my sentences.
Let him talk.
And then you can respond. The Adam and Eve story is that there was a male and female that were created within Adam's lifetime, and there was procreation that created more people, and that's it. It has nothing to do with evolution.
With evolution,
Evolution goes all the way back and back and back and back and back to single
there
cells.
to a single cell. When did that single cell finally become two, and then how did it reproduce?
We know well, we don't know how it probably the early reproduction was asexual, because the sexual separation didn't come for some time later.
All right. Well,
so you've got nucleated cells, and then before that you've got what is it? Prokaryotes, the single cells without a nucleus.
The single cells,
which are essentially bacteria.
Yeah, I'm done.
But back to what I said before, I don't know if you can recall.
I don't understand.
Did I just
Therefore,
biology
magic.
him away?
Back to what I said. I don't know if you remember what I said previously
He got schooled
about my concept of Adam and Eve happening at a certain moment along the line of evolution, and that's when the story of Adam and Eve is interpreted to take place along this line of evolution. Do you remember me talking about that, where I was like, there was one moment where there wasn't thought, and then there was a moment where there was thought?
Yeah, and that's incorrect.
Okay, yeah, I understand that, but I feel like that also kind of supports the idea of sin, because along the evolution concept, where's the point where there is right and wrong? Because there was a point in evolution where humans could not do wrong because they could not make these quote unquote sinful decisions.
Again, we have to define point as a time of 10,000 generations. So 10,000 times 20, 200,000 years. So somewhere within 200,000 years or something like that, if I got my math right.
And wouldn't we all be like products of incest at that point?
No.
With Adam and Eve? I mean, like,
what I'm saying about the sin thing is like, look at some major, I'm using the word sin as a label for wrong actions, or the morally wrong actions. There was a moment in evolution where greed did not exist, or lust did not exist, even murder was justified.
There's a time in evolution where where we are not aware of morality because we're not thinking in terms of value, we're thinking in terms of function. We only act in terms of
Yes.
function, right? So
Yes.
there's staying alive, there's not staying alive, there's protecting my kin as opposed to
Yes.
your kin, those types of things. Over a long time, it gets to be more into the golden rule kind of thing because we're aware of the other guys, and then we also start to become aware of the idea of cooperation and reciprocal altruism. If I help you, you'll help me back, and those things start to come together in early tribal cultures, which is groups of 50 to 150 people.
Facts. We see examples. They see examples of it.
I mean, I agree with you, but I still find it hard to understand how there wasn't a moment where there wasn't, and then there was a moment where there was.
Because the moment is 10,000 generations apart.
But
there are no moment shifts in evolution. It's well, I mean there can be, but it is a gradual, very slow process.
But that gradual process starts at 0.0001%.
Yeah.
And that 0.001% is still a shift in evolution.
Right. So
and it's still a moment where there was, and then where there wasn't, and then there was.
But it's never a moment. Let's say that on step 60 million, okay, there wasn't. Let's just say that. It's somewhere around step 70 million that you have a yes now. So it is a very fuzzy, slow-moving spectrum. So, so there's a time. There was a time before.
Slow-moving spectrum. The spectrum started somewhere,
and there's a time after. There's no moment. So, are we okay with that?
I mean, it's kind of hard to understand that concept.
If the earliest humans
just take a number line and spread it out. Between 1 and 2, there's an infinite number of integers. So there could be a million steps between.
Well, you can see it in everyday life, like like a close friend or something you have, you see them every day or something, or a family member and stuff, and you don't see any change in them day after day after day, right? But however, if you went away and were gone for like 2 or 3 years and came back, you'd be like, wow, you look so much older now, or whatever, right? You can see that change after those years. Now, assume like each of those seconds is 1,000 years. That's, along the lines of evolution. Every moment, every day you see them, they look the same. Same as evolution. You can look back in time, and from one moment to the next moment, one generation to the next generation, you're not going to see a difference. But when you see thousands of generations pass from that first generation to the last generation to the thousandth generation, you will see a change.
I disagree, because you're drawing a parallel between our ability to not be able to our ability to not be able to see minute differences. Like, yes, you're going to look the same day to day, but there was a second where you didn't have a gray hair, and then there was a second where you did have a gray hair. And although in the grand scheme it's unnoticeable, there still was that second. And like you said, for the integers, that's a really good point. They're in between. You take a timeline of 1 and 2. In between 1 and 2, there's infinite integers. But in time, is that necessarily true? Because if in between 1 second and 2 seconds there's infinite integers, then we would never reach second number 2.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to we'd have to talk about something doesn't go to infinity. So
there's
let's talk about a single generation for a second. There is only so much change you can make from one generation to the next, and on average, humans have about 60. I think is the number. DNA variations from one generation to the next, according to things going wrong.
68.
Yeah, and I understand, but I think you're drawing a parallel between, like, we look at the development of the human skull. There was not a moment shift where one moment our skulls were like this and the next it wasn't, because that is a constantly changing thing within evolution. But I think thoughts and consciousness is different with the connections of, like, neurons. I think there's 1 second there's a thought, and 1 second there isn't. And I understand I might be wrong. I'm just saying it's a hard concept to grasp.
Well, I think it is.
Well, okay. Let's stick with this for 1 second, because you're kind of right, but you're not quite catching the scale still, because something like having a single thought is a very specific, fine-grained thing, right? The development
Yeah.
of morality, the concept of value compared to function, is a very complex thing that takes more time. So
Yeah.
I think that's where the
Well,
difficulty is coming
I
in.
mean, if you look at a human life, if you look at a baby, and we develop our own morals throughout our life, a 1 week old baby has no morals. And yes, we develop our morals throughout our life, but if you could go to a minuscule microscopic 1/1 trillion billionth of a second, there is a second where a human life doesn't have morals, and then they do have morals. Even though it's
Yeah.
so minuscule that it's really not a difference, it actually still is there.
I'm just
It
gonna have
had
to
to start
disagree with you
somewhere.
on that one,
I mean,
because we've gone through,
well,
we've
where
gone
does that
we've gone
come
in
from,
3
though?
times
I mean,
around
where?
on this, so
Yeah.
I just
Right, we
disagree.
have.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, I can say, sure, if you zoom in enough on something and you decide you want to draw a line somewhere and say this is and this isn't, you could, but someone else could draw the line somewhere else. It's not going to be definitive. It's not going to be an
Yeah.
objective line of this is and this isn't. It's
Have-
just going to be based on what you define as a difference.
Here's another
Yeah.
analogy that comes to mind. Have you ever seen a chart on eye development? How the
That's a
eye
good one.
Yeah.
how the eye came
Yeah.
to be?
Oh, that's
Right.
good.
You know,
That is
so
a good.
so you've got there's no single second where there's no sight and then there's sight. You've got you've got photosensitive cells, and then you've got eventually a lens that happens, and then eventually um focusing and eyelids and all these steps. There's all these different steps where it just becomes from very simple to better and better and better and better and better and better and better. It's there's no big transition on something that has so many steps to it. I mean, there's no
Right.
fast transition
Yeah,
to something
but
that
I
has so
think
many steps to it.
I think you're making the same parallel to what I said about the human skull, because the eye is something that's constantly changing in evolution. So obviously
But
you're not going to be able to tie a parallel to what I'm saying with that example. Like, yeah, I agree with you, and I understand that, but I think that's different than the
Yeah.
idea of morals coming to be, even in a human life. Or are you saying that babies are born with morals, but just at such a minuscule scale that they
born
develop?
with some moral precursor knowledge. Yes,
Well,
they're born
then
with
maybe
some.
we had morals all along.
Yeah, we have some. We have at least the precursors. They're born with some knowledge of cooperation versus taking advantage of each other. They're born with both of those pieces in some measure, and then they learn through culture how to manage that. You know, and then whether or not they're successful, it obviously depends on what the culture teaches them and what kind of personality that they have, if they're more or less selfish and things like this.
I do understand what you're saying, though, Danny. I really do. I mean, it's hard to define it down to that single moment where there was no thought, then there was
Yeah,
thought. You know,
I mean,
think
I
it's
don't
bigger
think
than
we
that.
will be able to. I
Now,
don't think we would be able to.
thought is a different thing, because like having a specific thought might actually be a quantum event in was it microtubules in nerve cells. So
Yeah.
the initiation of a thought may be a small enough thing that happens from 1 second to the next.
Yeah, and the whole point I brought all of that up is because I'm saying that in which, so maybe we're establishing it may have happened. That would be an explanation for when the interpretation of Adam and Eve takes place. That's my reasoning behind that. Adam
I
and
mean,
Eve is the interpretation of when that moment in time took place. I'm not saying Adam and Eve happened. I'm saying that's the human interpretation
Yeah.
of that moment, which we clearly
I
don't
would have to
understand.
agree.
So there's a lot of discrepancies with the Adam and Eve story, because you can't just take it as, all right, God created Adam and Eve, and there comes the rest of the human race, because the rest of the story with Adam and Eve just doesn't make sense. I mean, they have a son, Cain, who kills their other son, Abel.
Yeah, there's a
And
talking snake. Like,
no,
Yeah,
no,
I'd like
I'm
to go
not.
back to the
Hold
talking
on,
snake
let me
because-
finish talking.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm agreeing with you.
So then Cain goes out. I'm not even talking about the talking snake or any of that, but
Cain goes out, right, after being cast out from his family for killing his brother, and he goes to another city. Where'd that city come from? Where'd the other people come from? It leaves this, like, there's other people and stuff around. Now, apologists will say, well, that was cast down angels or Nephilim that were there, or this other stuff, or there was generations of incest and other children of Adam and Eve that they never talk about, but they must have been because they had to. But it's not explaining the story. So the story doesn't make sense. So the only explanation I came up with when I was a Christian was that would make sense to me was it's all a made up story. So it's not based in reality. It's just something that the early Abrahamic fathers came up with to answer the question of where we came from, because as I've said before, humans have this innate desire to answer the question of where we came from, what are we here for, what's our purpose? And the answer is 42, but you know.
If you read the Bible and then watch the movie Dogma, you'll realize it's all fake.
I'm sorry, what was that sentence again? You read it in terms of what?
If you read the Bible and then watch the movie Dogma,
Dogma,
with Chris Rock, you'll realize this shit was all fake.
I still need.
I think saying it's all fake is a strong word, because, like I said, fake and interpretation is completely different. Like, if I tell you a story that is a representation of something, if I tell you a story about two friends I had, but I changed their names and I changed where they are for the sake of their privacy, yes, the story is fake, but I'm telling you like a true story.
Yeah, I get
does
what
that
you're
make
saying.
sense?
You're referencing something that may have really happened. It's kind of like the story.
It happened, but in a way we didn't understand.
Goliath. David and Goliath could have just been just a story of Mayweather fighting a heavyweight, and he beat him.
Or
you know what I mean?
Or
like
Noah's Ark. Is Noah's Ark feasible? Not at all.
It's something. I get what you're saying. There's an origin of something that really did probably happen. Just like my belief is that a lot of the events in the Bible that they believed were magic were just weather patterns. You know, something that happened in nature that they didn't understand, and they interpreted it as an act of God. And when a tsunami happened or a tornado happened, they believed that it was from a god, and it really wasn't. It was just weather, but they didn't understand weather because they didn't have Google, they didn't have libraries, they didn't know how to study it. They just knew that a horrendous storm came through, and it was probably around the time everybody was running around doing all kinds of bad shit. You know what I mean? Sleeping with their neighbor and doing all kinds of horrible stuff, and they believe, it's a wrath of what we done, but it was just a tornado.
Yeah, I agree. And Noah's Ark is another example where Noah's Ark is an explanation of something that people didn't understand, of flooding, ice age, whatever. But even if we had scientific evidence that Noah's Ark really did happen, that doesn't even prove that God existed. What we have to look at is things beyond physical stories like tornadoes, hurricanes, Noah's Ark, and Adam and Eve, and look at things like existence itself and the afterlife and things like that. Obviously, stories like
that's
Adam and Eve and Noah's Ark aren't even going to prove God.
Was it you that was saying that people are just kind of like can't accept death or whatever? I thought I heard you say something like that.
Sasquatch, I don't know what you mean by, since we don't have an explanation. I think there's a scientific explanation to literally everything. I don't think the supernatural exists. And I don't think religion has to be supernatural. I don't think a higher entity has to be supernatural.
Yeah. I don't
I said that earlier. Anyway, I don't believe in any supernatural or anything outside of our physical world. I think gravity was outside of our physical world until we understood it. That doesn't mean it never wasn't in our physical world.
Right.
There's millions of possibilities of things that we don't understand. But what I think the real reason God even becomes a concept in humanity is the fact that people can't accept death. None of us can. If you knew you were going to die tomorrow, what would you do? Just imagine if you had that knowledge. You'd be worried, right? You'd be scared.
Great acceptance with death.
It would scare the hell out of you because The thought
I
of
would
not
accept it.
existing anymore is terrifying.
Not to me.
And then the fact that if there's an afterlife, that's even, I mean, like, I think religion
I
was
mean,
created
th-
around these kind of basic human thoughts that
that's
anyone
a
would
that's
have.
a
Any creation, any being on this planet, I think even animals probably think about their death, because when you are among yourself or humans or animals or whatever, you see examples of death. You see people get just unalived and they're not around no more. And you think,
yeah.
you relate
Yeah,
that, you somehow associate that to yourself.
sure.
And you think, what am I going to do? What's going to happen? And nobody can answer that question. So I think logically it makes sense that humans of a higher intelligence on the planet, because I don't think animals think like we do. I don't think animals have concepts that we do, but we have these concepts and emotions to follow it. So we believe that if we're gonna die, there's gonna be some kind of afterlife, because we can't accept the fact that when you're gone, you perish, you're in the ground, your bones turn to dust. That's it. People want to believe there's something after, or there's some way we're going to live on, and I think
So you
it's
believe there's
probably a
no
large part
afterlife?
of, huh?
You believe there's no afterlife at all?
I don't.
No, I don't. I mean, I think when you buried your grandma, or anybody who's ever passed away in your life, did they
Yeah,
ever come back? Did they ever exist again?
that's
Yes.
No. The
Mr.
only thing that
Host, as
ever
an
existed
agnostic
of them
atheist,
was
do you
their
agree with that?
memories and
yes.
everything that
I
they
agree
did
with
in
him.
their life.
I agree with him.
Yeah,
So my
there's
analogy for it is that it's going to be the same as it was before you were born.
Which
But
Well, I
is
don't
which
remember
is
there's
what it
no
was like
which
way
before I
for
was
you to
born.
there's no way for you to prove that, and there's no way you could even say that without bringing me a study on that, because nobody knows. Nobody has died and
Yeah,
then
there's
came
no way
back
for me
20
to
years
prove it. There's
later and
also no
said,
way for me to
"Hey,
prove there
death
wait,
was
isn't.
horrible."
wait. We know that we are basically a pattern, right? Each of us is a slightly different pattern, a unique pattern, and this
Yeah.
pattern needs to be functional to have thoughts and things. That doesn't necessarily mean we can't be dualistic and maybe there's a spirit that's different, but it does not seem likely. So it seems like there will be no consciousness at all, and we will just go back to the atoms, and those atoms will go on to do other things. So,
Like before you were born.
right. Well, I don't even like that analogy, like before we were born, because it seems to imply there was something before, and there was just disorganized atoms, right? And it got
Right.
organized by our parents, basically, by their DNA
Right.
recipe that
I
pulled atoms
non
from its atmosphere and then organized it into something that could think. And it just
right.
unwinds
I
and
just
goes in another direction.
Right. It's natural for any being of our intelligence or our superior intelligence over the earth that we live in. It is only logical that we would think that there was some kind of creator or something beyond us, because of
But
all
you
that we
choose
can
to
do
not
and
believe in it.
everything that we know. Right. We don't
It's
believe it
not
because
logical
we
to think
can't
there's a
prove
creator.
it.
It's
And
logical to believe in evolution.
What did you say?
well,
We
you
choose to disbelieve?
He said it's logical to think there's a creator. I don't think it's logical to think there's a creator. I think it's logical to believe in evolution, and it's logical to think that there's nothing
I know
before.
I'm speaking in terms of the
That is what
average
logic
Joe. Like
is.
I believe
Yeah.
there are different levels of intelligence and IQ in people. Some people think different, but the majority of like a human being who was born from a baby and grew up and lived in the world, it doesn't matter what passage of time you're in. I think that the next logical, thought for that person is, if they were to ever ponder where they came from or why the whole world exists, would be that there's something beyond them. Doesn't mean that there is,
When
and
I think of it that way, it doesn't mean that
it
there
doesn't
isn't,
mean
though.
that there will be. It just means that there are things within
It's such
our
a dumb
reality that we
argument.
can't explain and we can't understand, and
It's
a lot of us will interpret that as a god, or some of us will think logically and say it's just something we don't understand, we don't know.
That's what I
It's
say. I say we don't understand, and I think that we don't understand implies that there is, or
ah,
else, like I said, the first thing I said when we got in here, if there isn't, then we are God. We are the
No.
It
highest
doesn't
entity,
imply
which
that
I
there
don't
is.
believe we are.
It doesn't imply that there is.
It sounds like you're really
But it also,
loose with your definition of God.
I
I mean,
100% am. I've said that
Yeah.
many times. My
right,
definition
but
of God is the loosest definition.
but that doesn't make any sense. I mean, because you're basically ascribing God to anything you don't understand that you don't know, and that is
That's
not what
100% what I think it is.
that's not what most
I'll,
people associate with God. Is it's got to have some
well,
form
that's
of
because
definition. Now, different religions
And what
define
he's
God
thinking, it goes
with
back to
different
what I said
characteristics.
about people misinterpreting weather patterns as a god.
I
That's the same
can
thing you're
change
doing.
the reason
It's
I
something that
say
you don't
God.
understand. You're thinking that it's a god, but it may just be a tsunami or an
The
earthquake.
reason I say God is because Christianity is what I tie my interpretation into, because that's what I have the most human understanding with. I can change the word God to Steve and start saying Steve. It doesn't change any of my statements. I'm using the term God because Christianity is what I see the most connection with in my day-to-day life, because it's what's been put in my life.
I attribute Mother Nature. That's what I see as like God. I don't know.
Why do we have to?
And that's
Why
okay,
do we have to change the definition of the word God instead of what?
because he was saying my definition of God is loose because I'm like not following the Christian definition of God. Like
No, because
earlier I said I don't.
you're not following any definition of God. You're just saying God could be anything that we don't understand.
It's like
That's
when
And
exactly what I
that's
think
not a
God is.
definition of
like-
anything. That's just we don't understand it, right? Just
That's exactly
what I think
what
God
you
is.
said.
just saying
Yeah,
I
that
don't
you're
know
saying what I
equals
think.
God. Just say I don't know.
But I don't want to say I know. I'm going to say what my interpretation is.
I think where you're wrong though is when you say that because there could be something, because there are things that we don't know, that there are things currently beyond our current knowledge, that that means that there is an entity and a thinker and possibly even a creator. It doesn't imply any of those things. It just means there is information out there that we don't know. I mean, look at the picture behind me, right? These are all galaxies here. There's information about those galaxies that we don't know, and likely we will never get to them to know that stuff.
Wait, is that
It
Mars?
doesn't. No, that's a picture of the Hubble or the JWST Deep Field. So this area.
Oh, that's dope. I like looking at that kind of stuff.
Each
I
of
like
these
that
is
shit.
is a galaxy. Except I think this might be a star. I don't remember. I think they're all galaxies though. Pretty sure. Anyways, except for possibly one or two.
I don't know. Like another loose thing that I read recently that I kind of and is a connection that like wait 1 second. My let's just disconnected.
So while I have a chance, I'm willing to respond. Hopefully, Danny can hear me.
Yeah.
But earlier, Danny was saying some misconceptions about atheists that I want to clear up. Atheist just means a lack in belief of a theistic religion or faith, that you don't believe in God. It doesn't mean necessarily like some atheists do not believe that a God exists at all, period.
Yeah.
But
That's
atheist just means you do not believe, which does not necessitate that you believe that there isn't or can't be a God. So some people add in the agnostic part to it and stuff, which is fine. It gives further definition of that you're not sure. But atheism isn't a point of view. Like if you're atheist, doesn't mean that you do not believe that there can be a God. Like I'm atheist. I don't believe that the Christian God is real. I don't believe that any other gods that have been purported are real. I believe there's plenty of evidence against them. However, that doesn't mean that there couldn't be a God who created the universe, who started the Big Bang, who some being that is more powerful.
I thought that was literally
Wait, that's not agnostic? I think what you're describing is agnostic.
Yeah.
So, well, hold on. So I don't hold that there isn't, some being like this. However, the fact that there is no evidence of such being means that he's not taking any act or action that we have evidence of in our reality, means it doesn't really matter. But I'm still atheist because I do not believe in theism. I do
I
not
mean,
believe it's true, but I don't hold that it can't be true.
well, then part of you does believe that it could be true. Then I feel like you're not atheist then.
I do not hold, I cannot prove it not to be true. So I can't say with absolute certainty that it's not true.
Well, you can't really
But I
prove
do not
anything.
believe it is
That
true.
is the
true.
agnostic atheist. That's why we put those two words together. In a
Danny,
phrase.
you
It makes
said you were
sense.
God.
It makes sense. The agnostic,
So can I?
agnostic
I want to
atheist
try to
makes
get
sense.
this conversation in another direction here. So, Alias, let's let you in, and what have you got to add, or
Hi,
how
my
would you
name
like
is
to say?
Hi, my name is Jill. I'm
Jill.
Catholic. I'm Catholic, raised Catholic, and I wanted to ask Danny if he was Christian, then he would know that to claim that you're a god is blasphemous. If you follow the Christian Bible,
I'm
and
Catholic. I don't know what you're saying right now.
can you not hear me?
Define
I'm
Catholic? That's not that difficult.
No, I am Catholic. I don't understand why you're telling me that to claim you're God is blasphemy.
It says do not use God's name in vain
I know that. Well,
He
I don't
didn't
understand why you're telling me that.
because you claimed that you were God.
No, he didn't.
I don't think I did that.
I was here the
No,
whole live.
he did
I've been
not
on this
say
live
that.
for like 2.5 hours.
Yeah,
I do not think I ever said that.
Then
you
who was it
didn't.
that said that they thought they were God?
I am Catholic.
Wait, let her speak her
Well,
truth.
no,
What
actually,
exactly
I
did you
think,
hear?
Alias, I think what he did is he accused me of having that thought, and I had to correct him. And tell
No,
him
I
that-
did not accuse you. I think atheists. I think if you don't believe that there is a higher entity, you believe you are the higher entity.
Right.
You
Yeah,
are the
that's
highest
the point.
entity.
There you go. That's the point.
No, there was someone that claimed that they were God.
He's saying that we're God and we're not God. And he's saying that if there was no God, he would be God. But there's no such, it's stupid because, again, God is somebody who's all powerful, all knowing,
That's not true.
whatever.
That's the Christian definition of God.
Okay, no matter what you give the power of God, if you give
That,
God one more power than we have, we
that
can't
doesn't
be
make them all
God.
powerful. Having one more power than us doesn't make them all powerful. Just because they're a
No.
higher entity than us doesn't mean they're all
Okay,
powerful.
no matter
I
what.
said,
I would agree with that.
Okay, unless you say God is
That's
human.
Greek mythology.
Yeah, unless you say God is human, God can't. I mean, we cannot be God because we cannot have what God has.
I'm saying I'm very Catholic, so I don't know what the argument here is. I'm saying a higher entity. My original statement was atheists do not believe that there is a higher entity.
No, we don't believe there's a God.
If there isn't a highest entity, if there isn't a higher entity than us, then that means you are the highest entity. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
If there
That
is
doesn't
nothing
mean we're
higher, it
God.
means you are the
Okay,
highest.
we're going all the way back. Where are we at here? 2 hours 15 minutes. So
Can I
you have a different definition of God. So go ahead, Alias.
can
Or Jill.
okay, so let's say I said that I was the avatar of God or the vessel of God. Would you kick me out of this line?
Huh?
Me? No.
No? Okay, so does anyone want to refute that? Like why
I would.
Go
I'd
for
kick
it.
you out. You're gone.
I'd want to know what you're thinking and why you think it.
Well, I want you to tell me why I'm not.
Well,
I
mean,
don't know you, so I don't have.
This is the argument that
You're the one
people
making the
make.
claim. I mean, that's like me
Okay,
saying,
fine.
Yeah.
that's the
Fine,
same
go
as
ahead.
me saying I have a pink
Yeah.
elephant in my garage.
Well, normally people
Show
would
me
say
how
like,
I'm wrong.
normally people would say like based off of your experience, you can't just say that you are the avatar or God, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you make any claim, you have to, and it's an unusual claim.
So, do any of you believe in like deductive reasoning and based off of personal experience that is felicitated by the universe and the government
Whoa,
And
whoa,
like,
whoa, whoa,
Wait,
whoa!
wait,
You're covering a lot
hold
of
on,
ground there.
Atlas. Before you ask us why don't you tell us a little bit about what you believe in and what is your
oh,
understanding
my belief.
of a God or no God? Yeah. Why don't
Okay,
you
so
go
I
there?
believe
Lead
that
with that.
I believe. Well, I was raised Catholic, so that means that I celebrate women. Mary is like my mother's name. In Vietnamese, her main name means. Sorry, it's cold. The name means that pure Virgin Mary Snow. My name is Jill, and in Genesis 1, it says that.
Alice, that's gonna get boring if you monologue too much. Just get to like, do you believe that there's a God or not a
She's
God?
Catholic. That's all that you need to know. She's Catholic.
I'm graduated Catholic, and then I wanted to venture out into other religion to like figure out the meaning of older religions that have happened before Christianity. Because
Right.
without knowledge of like other religion, you won't be able to figure out like what the Bible or the divine writing or orchestrating of the Bible means.
So do you consider
And
yourself Christian, for sure, right?
yeah, I believe there's a God because I was raised. I have to honor the
But
fact that I am Catholic.
and you still consider yourself Catholic? Okay.
Yes, because that was most of my upbringing. I have to honor it, just like how I honor my mother and father. You know,
You
like
don't have to. If someone teaches you something that's wrong, you don't have to honor that. You know, it doesn't mean that they were dishonorable teaching you that either. If it's what they believed and it's what they thought was the
It's
right thing to
different in
teach.
Asian culture,
But
man.
you don't have to go along with it just because they taught you. You're allowed to think and question for yourself.
well, like Catholicism has raised me up to be the being that I am today, so I have to honor. Like I give honor to my religion, because let's
Do you
say,
know what indoctrination is?
is it like? Go ahead.
Jesus.
Indoctrination
It's
means,
basically.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Indoctrination means to don't question what you've been taught.
Oh, I've questioned it.
There you go.
Okay, so anyways, you question the fact that, let's say the Bible was a divine orchestrating of the next avatar.
The next avatar. How do we get
Yeah,
avatars out of Catholicism?
because if you look at Hinduism, one of the first religions, they talk about incarnation of God.
What,
And
can you
Hinduism, one
can
of
you
the oldest
can
religions.
you define avatar for
I
us
think
here?
she
avatar
believes
is the
that the spirit
incarnation or
of
a
God
vessel of
goes
God.
through people's bodies, and the body is the avatar, and the spirit of God is the driving force of the avatar. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. And
Okay.
so, although I don't follow Hinduism, I have to look at the facts that religion beforehand, and like today's science is based off of Hinduism, correct? Like the duality of light reflects off like the Milky Way. It talks about like the astral, physical, like
Have you ever read the Mahabharata
no,
or any Hindu scripture?
no. I was taught by, or I don't know. I was talking to this Hinduism guy. He was telling me all about it, and then I looked it up, and it seemed to connect. So that's where I get my information from.
Okay, I just don't know how you can say all of science is based on that.
No, I didn't say all of science. I said you can see that some science factors rely
You actually
on.
did say all of science.
I
You
did not
did
say
say
all of science
well,
because
let's not.
all is too.
She can correct
Right.
herself. She can correct herself.
Right.
So.
Okay, so anyways, you get Hinduism, and 400,000 years later, or something like that, you get Christianity, right? Christianity is before the Bible, so the Christians must have, let's say the whole world came together to build this divine intervention.
Christianity is before the Bible. The Old
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can look
Yeah,
that
that's
up.
not possible.
Christianity
That's
comes from the
wrong.
year zero, from Jesus forward. Before that, you've got Judaism and the Torah.
Unless you just mean 50 years before the Bible, then maybe.
I said Christianity comes before the Bible.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
how
doesn't.
long are we talking here?
It's literally by
Look it up.
definition just wrong. Christianity
No,
can
logically
clearly
it
not
could
come before
not.
the Bible.
Logically, it could
Right,
not come
you're right.
before the Bible.
Christianity is literally Christ.
Look it up.
Christianity, are you suggesting that Christianity does not come from Jesus?
No, Christianity is a religion that believes Jesus is God, right? And they
how
must
But
have.
Jesus was not around until roughly the year 0.
Yeah,
Right.
so that's where
And the Old Testament goes back to about 1500 BC.
the Old Testament.
Yeah.
The Old Testament is Judaism, which converts to Christianity at the birth of Christ.
Right.
The
Right.
The Old Testament is like when Jesus was an Israelite and
No.
That's
No.
Judaism.
That's Judaism.
That's not even Judaism. That's just nothing.
Like Atlantis, I think you have a belief that there was a belief of Christianity before there were humans, and that's just not possible.
no,
It's
that's not
true.
what I'm saying.
No, I don't think
I'm saying
that's.
Christianity was before the Holy Bible was written.
No, that's
I-
Judaism.
Somebody in the comments
Christian-
says if he means they wrote about it after Jesus, like the Bible wasn't currently being written during the time of Jesus. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
So basically, off of that introspection, the Old Testament is the Jesus at that era of that time. But
No.
based off of
No.
and the New Testament,
I mean,
And
Matthew,
I'm-
Mark,
I'm
Luke,
sure
and
my-
John
How
were
could that be
alive during
possible?
the time of Jesus.
what?
But there is no Jesus in the Old Testament.
The Old Testament says Jesus is an Israelite or
No, the Old Testament talks about a Messiah who will come,
Yeah.
a Messiah who will bring peace and prosperity, and all the nations will rejoice and worship
Never
him.
says
The
anything
Old
about
Testament
and
was
Or-
also
or
stuff
written
like that.
a
before
prophet.
The
wait,
messianic
so then where does Genesis 1 come from? The Old Testament or the New Testament?
Old.
Genesis is in the Old Testament. It's the Torah. It's the first book of the Bible.
Okay, so then that explains like
Does
anyways,
not mention Jesus.
okay, what I'm trying to say is that the Bible was written to determine the Messiah, which is the avatar, which is Christianity and Christian Christ. Like,
Well, parts of the Old Testament talk about Messiah, and that prophecy, none of those prophecies have come true.
I think she
Not
knows.
one. Not
No,
one of them.
I know,
That's
I know,
not. That's
I
not
know.
true.
I'm the
That not
avatar.
one of the prophecies have come
I
true.
know, but the other day you literally took 30 minutes to sit and try to explain how a married bachelor could exist.
Who is
So,
this?
like, I really think you're trolling.
Yeah, on the quantum physics, because I'm not trolling. Why would I troll? It's because I have comedic relief in me.
Because it's
I'm
fun.
just-
But anyways,
Can I change the
I'm trying to
topic,
explain.
Ralph? I
I'm
wanna
trying to
circle
explain
back.
how
No,
the
let's
Bible
not
connects
circle
to
back.
my life.
We
Uh,
spent enough time back, Danny. So keep going
So
forward.
we go forward.
okay, so now we're at the point where the Bible is written to orchestrate, to nurture the avatar. Okay. So like, let's say you can read the Bible.
Can I ask?
You can read.
Can I ask? Because I'm still a little fuzzy on this avatar thing. Is there a difference between avatar and prophet?
It's the same thing. It's like God incarnated in a vessel.
So that Jesus would have been an avatar, but we're not talking about
Yes.
every human being an avatar, are you?
I think Jesus was an example of an avatar.
But so prophets are avatars, but not every person, right?
I believe.
Yeah, she believes every person is an avatar.
No, I don't say that. Okay,
Every
so like
person
the
can be an avatar, right?
what?
I said you're trying to say that
let her
every.
speak. Let her speak. Let her explain
I'm-
herself.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so
So avatars would be people like Jesus and possibly Muhammad, and then going back in the other direction.
no. Okay, so Jesus, Christianity, which let's say Islam, Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. They're the three main religions. Okay.
Okay.
Let's say because I was raised Catholic, I have to believe that Jesus is the real connection to God.
Gosh, you don't have
Sorry,
to
I'm
believe
slow.
You don't have to believe anything because you were
Oh.
raised given that information. You really need to lose that phrase. You can
Okay,
say
fine.
I believe because I was taught, But you don't
Go ahead.
have to keep bad information if you learn you have bad information,
Oh, well,
to be
anyways,
honest.
let's say Islam decided to create their own religion because they did not believe that God was Allah, right?
They did not believe that Jesus was divine.
The Messiah.
Right.
So of course there's going to be a main character and antagonist, right? And you don't know which one comes first. But because the Christianity comes before Islam, the Quran comes
Yes.
after the Bible.
Yes.
So let's say hypothetically that
Wait. I thought the Quran came before Christianity. The Quran came
No.
from Moses.
Quran is 700 years later, about the year 680,
Okay.
617 or something like that.
So let's say that was the negation of Jesus and God, because Muhammad believed, like, maybe something bad happened to Muhammad and he just didn't want, like, maybe he was the atheist of that time, or some type of way that didn't believe that Jesus was who he said he was, and decided to make his own religion. But
Okay.
I'm not saying
Muhammad
that Islam is bad. I'm
Muhammad
saying that Islam.
It seems to have been, yes, they did not believe that Jesus was divine. This is me now. It seems to be that Muhammad was a person who wanted to basically put the Arab culture in the mix in terms of
Right.
leading the world
And
in
with
religion.
each religion, you can see that
So they
in
put it
each
into
religion.
they put it into their culture in that way, in a very similar way that Joseph Smith put it into his particular culture years later.
Right. But if Hinduism believed in a Hindu god, which was before Christianity.
Polytheism is,
Yeah.
well, it's sort of a mix, but yeah.
So let's say the incarnation or the avatar of each god. Let's say Jesus was the incarnation during that time.
Okay.
Of course, they're going to use Jesus in the most recent times to nurture the next avatar. Have you seen The Last Airbender? Where, like,
No.
and I'm not basing it off of The Last Airbender, by the way. But, like, I have to make a reference because, like, the avatar has to learn from the previous
That's a
avatar.
horrible movie. I hated it.
So
But-
can I summarize some of what I think you're just, and you tell me if I'm right. So you're thinking that the God embodies himself into something, and like, so the Hindus perceive that God, he's the avatar of, and Vishnu and Shiva and stuff like that, and that's who the Hindus perceived, and the same God was then the avatar of Jesus, and thus Christianity and everything, and maybe also into Muhammad. So all these religions are based off the same origin God, and it's just different avatars of the same God. Is that what you're saying?
I'm at the point of where I'm trying to find the truth. So, like, as the avatar who's trying to find the whole existence, the meaning of existence, I have to figure out through religion. So I'm backtracking through my deductive reasoning.
Find the first avatar, basically?
Ralph, I
No,
think you kind of
I'm-
more explained my thought process. I don't know what she's talking about.
I'm saying that, like, let's say Hinduism helped me learn that light was a like, the refraction of light can create, and the collision of particles and wave particles can create, like, collisions of multiple particles can create substance, right? Some type of substance. So let's say like
Well, you got.
let's say all five senses come together.
Whoa. Why do you do that with the Quran and not with a science book?
I don't do that with the Quran. Hindu?
No, you said it's from Islam. You said Islam.
No,
No,
she's
Hindu.
saying it's from Hindu.
Oh, from Hindu. Sorry.
Like Diwali, the Milky Way of light.
Okay.
So, like-
So what? Okay. I mean,
So, like-
we know how this stuff works now in modern times. So why do you have to go back 3,000 years to figure this stuff out? We know
Because
the
science
difference
comes
between
off.
we know the difference between fission and fusion.
Mm-hmm. So the whole idea of that diffusion is to the refraction of light. Let's say some people say that we are made out of light, but that does not make sense because we are genetically formed from our parents' offspring.
We're not made
right?
out of light. That's wrong.
Yeah, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So but the light is the, let's say, how vision works. So let's say my vision creates a reality or a reflection that refracts off into different, through the double slit experiment. Like, let's say it refracts into different directions, and during that, while I create my reality, people create the same, or people are experiencing my reality through vicarious experience. So let's say everything I see ricochets off into everyone's existence, and someone's telling me to stop or whatever. I'm not sure. Usually my things are hacked because I don't know.
Yeah,
Does that
Wait,
make
how
sense?
can
I'm
people see
confused.
what? How can people reflect off of what you're seeing or your reality? How can
Because
anyone else know what's in your brain or what you're perceiving as reality?
Because I believe,
How?
because I know,
This is the whole if a tree falls and you're not around to hear it, nobody else is gonna hear it.
because I know the fact that if I see something that happens before me, before my, like, let's say my thought manifests into reality, people will take that private information that I have.
I'm
Sorry.
totally lost.
Wait, how would they get that information though? How would
If a
they
tree
know what
falls in
you're?
the woods and I'm standing next to it, but you aren't, does it make noise?
I don't know. I never get those.
What?
Right. I mean, you're like what you're describing kind of sounds like a narcissistic way. Like you're just
No,
thinking of
I'm
it
not
from your
narcissistic. I'm trying
you're
to
thinking of
tell
it
you.
from your perspective,
Denial.
but there's
Okay, then explain to me why
nobody.
you aren't the avatar. And I'm trying, that's why I want to ask you, why don't you think that you are the avatar and I'm not? And I'm trying to get people to negate me.
I mean, well,
Because I don't see reality the way you see it.
what evidence do you have that you're the avatar? Can you do supernatural things?
You know how
Can you
Jesus
read
is
my
the
mind
child of
right
God
now?
and he's in human form? Humans
That's
don't
the
have
story.
that.
That's the story.
Yeah, humans don't have any supernatural ability.
So what about you being an avatar makes you different than any other human?
Personal experience. So let's say, have any of you been in an experiment and consciously aware of that experiment?
Sure.
I have a
Yes.
question, if you don't mind. Alias,
Yeah?
what religion were you brought up in when you were growing up? Were you brought up in a very religious household?
Said Catholic.
Not strict. I mean, like, going to church, yes, strict. Going to CCD, strict, but I didn't understand the Bible because I couldn't comprehend how in depth it should have been
I see.
until experiencing it at a later life, like living the essence of Jesus in the
Okay,
Bible, which
have
the Bible
you
is used
let me
to
ask you
anoint
let
the
me
sick.
ask you something. Let me ask you something. Have you read the Bible in its entirety?
When I was younger,
That sounds like
yes.
Trump.
No,
No.
and there's a reason that I'm asking you this, okay? All right. Because the fact of the matter is if you read the Bible in its entirety rather than relying on someone to interpret their meaning of the Bible to you, you might come to your own conclusion. And I guess that's the thing that I'm advocating, all right, is you need to come to your own terms, not someone else's, or try to figure it out. It's as Phil or Believe in Reality said, all right, we have science. We've discovered many, many things. A lot of what we were taught when we were young is nothing more than a myth. All the religions you were talking about, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, they are all Abrahamic religions. And how, just for your own edification, how Muhammad came about was because he was a descendant of Hagar, which was the handmaid of Abraham. Because remember, Sarah couldn't have a son. So Hagar had a son, and Muhammad was a descendant of that line. They're all related. First and
Okay.
foremost, so that's just a side thing. First and foremost, I highly, highly recommend that you read the Bible in its entirety and do not depend on other people to interpret it for you. Otherwise, you're going to be going around in circles. And what you're believing may not be the truth.
Okay, I did read the Bible when I was younger.
Did you read it? Every single
Okay.
bit of it?
But I couldn't understand it until I lived it.
But how could you?
Because
How
I
do
was
you
in
know
an
you lived
experiment.
it if you don't understand it? See, that's what I'm
Because
saying.
You were
because
in
at
a
a young
Bible
age.
experiment?
Wait,
So
can I?
maybe you should read it
Let's
again. Maybe you
hold,
should
hold
read it
on,
again since you're older.
Dana.
Sure.
Let's let her answer the question. Like, explain how. Like the big question is like she says she's an avatar, and I mean that's to me is a huge question. Like, how can you be an avatar?
Okay. Because you have to do deductive reasoning, which is going back from let's say I question who am I, and I know this is narcissistic, but you always have to ask your question at the end of the day, who am I, and then you search, you go through personal experience, and based off those personal experience, why am I compared to everyone else in a government experiment, and why are they monitoring me,
You were in a
disabling me,
government
making me live the
experiment?
life of a disabled person, just like how Jesus carried sin, or not sin, not to say
Mm.
that disabled are sin, but
Wait,
Tell us about
made
the
you
me
can't just
bear,
experiment.
gloss over
made,
that. The government experiment part, you lost me. How are
Yeah.
you a government experiment?
okay, government experiment. So I was put in the psych ward, and people don't kick me out because I said I was in the psych ward because people think schizophrenia and hearing voices. I don't have any of that. I only have intuition. Okay, so why would they put me in a psych ward? Like, yeah, I was bullied and I had a lot of trauma, but I was going through college when they put me through that, and I was doing perfectly fine.
I don't think any of us can answer that or want to venture into that territory. That's not something any of us can because we don't know anything about you really.
Right.
The question is like you're claiming
I
you're an
have a
avatar.
thesis.
To be an avatar means you are somehow different from the rest of us human folk who aren't avatars. So what is that difference?
Okay, so the difference is, okay, let's start from what we have all the same, the intrinsic factor. So we all inhibit like characteristics such as the five senses, gene, DNA. The only thing difference is between my consciousness and your consciousness is that, let's say, life force, that is so different that the government has to monitor.
So do you have a lightsaber?
You mean like a soul?
No, because I believe everyone has a
What's
soul.
different about yours compared to ours?
Because, okay, let's say, okay, so let's say that, like, I can't say why I'm different than yours, but other people can witness it.
Okay, so what have other people said about yours? If you can't say it,
The
what did they say?
the
What
government
did the
is
government say
gene
about you?
modification, right? The gene can modify, right? And through this experiment of my family,
Like
I can
CRISPR? Are you talking about like CRISPR?
yeah,
You are?
something like that, like gene modification. I don't know.
You were subject to a CRISPR experiment? That is insane.
I don't know what CRISPR is. I know CRISPR is the gene modification, but my
Well, you
family,
do know what CRISPR is then. You just
no,
defined
because
it.
Okay.
my family.
This is coming dangerously close to me saying that I don't want to go into this. So
Okay, so I'm trying to explain.
Me
I know what
neither.
CRISPR is.
and I think we may be over the edge here.
So bottom
I think
line,
so.
so bottom line, you're saying all this stuff, but I still haven't heard like how are you different?
Okay,
That
this
you've
can be
been
observed through
Her
government
genes have been
experiments.
modified.
I'm
Right.
gene modified, but
This isn't unrealistic. These are experiments that they are running on people. So what are the odds we run into them, one of them, on TikTok Live? I mean, it's not
Very, very low.
unfathomable. Yeah, they are very, very low, but it's not.
Yeah, probably next to zero.
thank you. But like, okay, so like, let's say they stumbled across a life force that was different under a microscope. Would that not?
Hey, Alice, do you believe you're a government experiment?
I am in one. I know, because I took psychology classes, and if you can, let's say my family is a family of 10. It's a family of 10. My mom named all of us the same name, the control group, and she doesn't know a lick of English. But each of our names are meaning angel. Okay.
This sounds like the Umbrella Academy.
But anyways,
That's
I don't know what that is.
perfect. That is exactly it.
But anyways, so like our family name is we're part of the Win faction. Okay. So that doesn't mean we're royal blood. I believe we're royal blood, but we can't say that. So I believe that they took the Win dynasty. That's why we went to the Vietnam War to experiment on my
Vietnam War
family.
over communism.
So should
believe that?
Should we stop listening to this? Because if the government's doing this experiment on you and they're monitoring you, are they going to
I'm
hear
not trying to have
that
the
you're
FBI at my
revealing
door.
Are they going to take
these
down your
secrets?
lives?
Hey, I
No,
want
they're not
to
gonna take
know
you guys
why.
away.
I want to know why the government would want to experiment on you. What have you done for the government to come and want
I
to
didn't do anything. I
Immigrant.
was innocent.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to put an end to this. This is believe in
All right.
reality here. So
Wait, you didn't hear the end of it.
go ahead.
Ugh.
Okay, so my mom doesn't know a lick of
We know
English.
how it ends.
My name is Jill, child of God's earthly, and I was given that name by the government. And what's on your hand? You see your hand.
And that's it.
Yeah, that was getting a way wacky crazy.
Yeah.
That was
It was
top 10
interesting.
weirdest experiences.
I was in the rabbit hole. It was like an episode of Yellow Jackets.
I do want to say that they do have gene CRISPR therapy on medical maladies such as wet AMD, that sort of thing. So there are therapies out there to treat different illnesses, and it's being met with great success. But
Yeah,
that's another time.
But you know what's
I
there's too
understand,
many
sure.
too many red flags there for
Yeah,
something
it-
like that
it's-
that we don't want to encourage. So and please
Exactly.
no spoilers on Yellow Jackets. I haven't seen it yet, and they just let season 2 out. So
I just started the second season, bro. You got to go in.
I was just
You gotta
waiting
binge.
for her to, go from having this life force and everything to saying she just got her lightsaber last week or something.
well, I don't want to
I
don't want to
think-
tease her either. So
No, no, I don't want to. I don't want to disparage her in any way because obviously there's problems there, and I just
Or
don't.
maybe
do
she's
that.
telling the truth, which would be insane.
let's not go there. So I am going to be wrapping this up now. But
Oh.
let's see, Dina.
Hi.
You came in late, so did you want to have the floor for a bit and then tell us what you wanted to come in for, or did you come in to comment on what was already happening?
Well, I came in because I saw it and I thought, ask an atheist. Oh, that would be me. Basically, I'm very spiritual, but no, I'm very a-religious, okay? And I've done a lot of studying in comparative religions, and I, in fact, did read the Bible front to back twice and started a journey from there. And growing up in a very, not a Christian, but growing up Christian, that proved to be an existential crisis, if you will. But I'm very
In what way?
and well, it's as I was telling her, and it probably wouldn't be a good idea for her to do it, but after reading the Bible, and I read it in depth, and I read it twice just to make sure I had an understanding of it, I knew that there was no way I could subscribe to a religion that showed so much suffering and xenophobia and misogyny, and it seemed to support, promote things, how slaves should um, respect their masters, and yada yada yada. I could go on forever, but anyway,
does that seem to you? I mean, it seems to me like all that stuff is just very um the culture of the time. You know, I mean,
it's the culture of the time.
humans have been very misogynistic through their early cultural evolution.
Yes, but especially back in the day, and especially in our
Yeah.
religions, because basically you take Islam, and not all Islam, because there's progressive Islamists, if you will,
Yeah.
Muslims. But it's sad that we still hold to some of those mores, if you will, and it's causing difficulty in our society today, especially societies that are trying to move toward a more egalitarian role. So
I think
I think
As
that some of that is because of the difference between religions and conservatism. Some of this
exactly
misogyny, the fear-based thinking, the xenophobia, that goes along with the conservative personalities and
correct,
studies that they've done. So
correct.
maybe don't blame it for religion. However, since religion is like written as a piece of the time by misogynistic men of the time,
Right,
it is
right.
something that should not be
But not
carried
just,
into modern
and I
times.
don't want to I don't want to focus on the misogynistic part of it,
Piece of it.
even the xenophobic, or it's basically, and I do have a degree in psychology
Oh,
and sociology, and I have other degrees. That was my first degree. I got it because I thought it was a basket weaving degree. It was so easy, but I enjoyed it. I enjoy people. But the thing that I took away from it, especially after delving into philosophy, is I think people are attracted to religion, to organized religion, because it gives them a sense of community, it gives them a sense of belonging. And because we're such social creatures, they have a tendency to gravitate toward that. And many times, when people are told something and it seems reasonable at the time, rather than doing their own research or questioning, they just accept it, which is why we have many
I
of the problems that we have today, unfortunately. So
that
I
that argument seems like not true to me though, because from everything we've discussed tonight, religion doesn't seem like a logical answer at all.
that
There's very little evidence for religion, and there's so many different versions of religion. It seems like the logical answer will always be science and not religion.
exactly,
Or
which is
the logical answer would be I don't know. Like, I mean,
I
I'm not going to boast my own intellectual ability, but I like to think if I lived in the time of Romans and someone came up to me and was like, "Yeah, that lightning bolt was Zeus," I would be like, "That doesn't seem logical."
yeah,
Probably
but
not. I would probably believe them.
We'd
But
exactly,
I think
exactly. But
probably
at the
would.
same time, you don't have if you were living in the Roman times, you wouldn't have all the educational tools that you have today. You wouldn't have the information that you have today. I believe in science. I revere nature. Okay. I don't think that we have all the answers, but I know that I certainly don't follow organized religion, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Come back in another time, Dina, a little bit earlier. I'm here from 7:30 Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
I'll do that.
I'd like to hear more from you. I think you'd be interesting.
Thank you.
At any rate, it is 10:20, so I think it's a good time for me to wrap up and put the dog outside too.
Hey,
So.
I appreciate you letting me on and stay up, and you
It's
didn't kick me off.
just to clarify, for Londo got hit a couple of times. If as long as you're participating, I'll probably keep you up. I do want to have. It
yeah,
depends on
thank
how
you.
many people are requesting in too. If it's kind of quiet, I'll keep you up. If people go quiet for a while and I have a lot of people wanting to come in, then I do a little bit of turnover.
I'm gonna do more research this week and maybe actually have evidence next time.
All right.
The problem, Phil,
Yep.
sometimes people just talk a lot, and it's hard to like. When do you cut in and just like, oh my god?
It's
Yeah.
never obvious.
Sometimes I
It is
sit
never
back and I'm
obvious.
like, oh,
So
I just.
I would love to hear your evidence, Danny.
Just shut up
Hey,
the whole
I
time.
I
Shut the
feel
hell
like I
up.
was in a 1v6 for the last 2 hours. And
that
with I'm not gonna lie, I've done no research and I really don't know much of anything. So
Well, you did a good
But
job, 1v6. Honestly, it tends to go that way. It's like 1v5 or 6, and it's what keeps the show interesting. You need the spark. I don't want to say the antagonist because that's not a little bit off description, but sometimes it is that way.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, you did good. You bring different people with different perspectives together.
yeah.
You let them all sit in a room, and not a lot of lives do that. A lot of them would cut you off or mute you or weaponize the drop button before you can even say anything.
Yeah.
And the fact that you bring different people from all different walks of life together and let them just like that's why I followed you.
Well, thank you.
I admire that.
Thank you. So let's keep doing it. That's what we're all here. We all kind of need this interaction, I think, these days. So
Well, thank you for letting me up.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming up.
all right, but
Thanks for the gifts tonight, everybody, and I'll see you in a couple of days. Take care.
Alrighty.
Take care of yourselves.
Bye-bye.
Be kind.